existed. And one of the mills is still shown on some of those early maps from the early 1900s. So then the big change occurred in the 1930s. Henry Ford, if you're familiar with him, went around Southeast Michigan and started a lot of what they call cottage industries. So on several different areas, he created, and particularly was very interested in energy production for self-sustaining industries, and created a number of small industries powered by hydroelectric power. And so in the 1930s, and specifically more about 1935, we know that a new dam was constructed in its current location. So we have basically the earthen dam, and as well as the concrete spillway was installed at that point in time as well. And there was also basically a channel created to service the then mill at the time to provide electric power for small cottage industries. So we see the raceway, or the way that the mill race that occurred at that point in time that was constructed in the 1930s. Then you see a series of photos here, and kind of that original 1930s configuration. In 1968, I don't know if people know that, the dam actually failed and washed out. Most of the earth embankment had to be completely rebuilt. At that point in time, they also reconstructed the concrete spillway as well as added 2 radial gates. And that took several years. Finally, the power was reestablished about 1972. So it took several years to rebuild the dam, adding the radial gates and changing that concrete structure to, again, provide more flow and hopefully prevent a future failure. And that's basically how it's existed. From 1972 to present day configuration is how the dam exists today with very little modification after that point. This was obviously, then we get into the 1990s, and this is where basically the city took over management of the dam. And this previously was managed by the Washington County Drain Commission, or Water Resources Commission, and then the city took that over in the 1990s. At that point in time, maybe the next slide, we'll play the video and talk a little bit more about the history of that. Also, some of the elements that were added to the historical register at that time in the 1990s.
I don't know if we want to hold the mic to this. Because the sound's only coming out of my computer. That's what I'm saying. So I'm going to hit play.
All right.
Imagine the excitement when Henry Ford himself arrived in the small, rural village of Saline to restore the long-delayed...
I guess we started. I was going to make it full screen, but we're just going to watch it here. Apologies.
Imagine the excitement when Henry Ford himself arrived in the small, rural village of Saline to restore the long-dilapidated Schuler grist mill. Locals could hardly believe he was interested in this quiet corner of Michigan. But like all great visionaries, Ford saw what others did not, a chance to merge urban industry with rural agriculture using a little-known and underutilized crop, the soybean. Ford hired over 700 area farmers to grow soybeans, trucking their harvests to Saline, where they are processed into soybean oil for use in automotive paints. To power the soybean processing facility, Ford constructed the dam that created the Saline Mill Pond in 1935. The mill pond channeled water into the head race, which turned a turbine inside Weller's, generating electricity for the refinery. The water then flowed through a stone tail race beneath the building before rejoining the Saline River. These integrated structures, the dam, head race, turbine, tail race, and...
I think you have to open up YouTube directly to make it play. Because it's trying to play it in the PowerPoint and it's freezing.
Imagine the excitement when Henry Ford himself arrived in the small, rural village of Salem.
Still not seeing reasons for whatever reason it's one of the entertaining as opposed to running it. Let me just stop sharing.
Probably AI.
To restore the long dilapidated Schuler grist mill. Locals could hardly believe he was interested in this quiet corner of Michigan. But like all great visionaries, Ford saw what others did not. A chance to merge urban industry with rural agriculture using a little known and underutilized crop, the soybean. Ford hired over 700 area farmers to grow soybeans, trucking their harvests to Saline, where they are processed into soybean oil for use in automotive paints. To power the soybean processing facility, Ford constructed the dam that created the Saline mill pond in 1935. The mill pond channeled water into the head race.
Yeah, it's, I think the issue with Airtame, trying to run the video through Airtame. Good news is now I haven't stopped and.
Catching up there.
No, I don't think so. If I stop it. I'm sure. Video. Oh, there it goes.
This is kind of like watching Roku channel.
I have it on this thumb drive, that makes it easier.
I think it's the transmission to the
It's a
cameras.
transmission to what you guys are watching. It's playing fine on here. It's not playing fine to the. So I'm just gonna hit, let's see how long
Turned the turbine inside Wellers, generating electricity for the refinery. The water then flowed through a stone tail race beneath the building before rejoining the Saline River.
See, it's not keeping up. You wanna just, I think we go back to the PowerPoint and play this when Sarah gets here.
Okay.
That's what we do, 'cause I'm gonna go back to this.
Dan, make sure you hold that mic real close, because I heard from somebody who's on YouTube that it's a little bit difficult to hear you. That goes for everybody else when we get to comments or questions. Just make sure you hold that microphone very close to your mouth.
Thank you. So obviously, we're gonna play the video again at the end. Hopefully we can stream it directly through a hardwired connection in the video booth. So with that, we're gonna continue with the PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll finish that up at the end of the presentation. Go back to the other one. So now, next I want to talk a little bit about the elements of the dam that were registered as historical elements as part of the 1990s takeover by the city. So there are several components, including the Wellers building, which was the original portions of the original mill. There was the concrete spillway that was constructed in the 1930s. And there we go. There was what was called the swimming pool. So in the 30s and 40s, I understand that people actually got on there and swim. So there's a little head dam further down the river that actually formed a swimming pool area along the river. And with that, then we also had the mill race that fed the mill as part of the concrete structure on the upper end, as well as as was mentioned in the video, the stone tail race behind the mill. So those are the historical elements of that. One thing we're going to take a look at also is if we do use federal funds in either the rehab or the removal of the dam, we're going to require a historical review. So we'll take a closer look at that based on the decision that's made, whether to rehabilitate or remove the dam. Also, just looking at that, we do also report to EGLE, which is the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. This is the regulatory agency that regulates dams. So any change to the dam, whether that be rehabbing it and or removing it, will also require a permit from EGLE. So we'll go through that process, review process, once the decision which direction is to be, which direction City Council chooses to proceed. So those are some of the next steps, regardless of whether we rehab or removal, some of the next steps that we need to step through. So with that, I want to turn this over to Engineer Humphreys, talk a little bit about the different components of the dam, and that's going to be important to understand as we look at what would be involved in rehabbing the dam and removal of the dam. So with that, Engineer Humphreys.
I'm gonna talk into here. Can everybody hear me out of this just fine? So I'm gonna
Pull a
start.
little bit closer,
A little bit
Tesha.
closer?
Yep,
I can do that. Okay, is that better?
better.
So I guess I'm gonna start out by saying that this is not my comfortable forte, talking to a room full of people. I'm much happier to talk to all of you after the meeting and to answer questions. So obviously IT is not my forte, now that I'm doing that today. But I have learned a lot about our dam in the last couple of years since I've been working on this. And so I guess I want to share as much, I'm trying to share as much as I can here in this short slide. It's a short slide, so for all the things I've learned about the dam. So this first, thank you, Erin, good point. I tend to talk with my hands in my, and so I will try to stay still so you can clearly understand me and so it gets picked up on the virtual. So this first slide here, we're looking at the components of the dam. I think I'm gonna start here on the bottom right, where the aerial view. We're gonna spend a little bit of time talking about the main spillway and such, but as City Manager Swallow just talked about in the 1935 when the dam was constructed, this is where the mill race that fed the old mill here that is now the Weller's site. So this is, the mill race is located, so if you're coming in from the west, it's the first great gated structure you see as you come into town, and then of course the large spillway dam is here. Looking from here up to here, this is just a better picture looking straight on from the dam with everything labeled. This over here on the left is a picture of what's on the right, just color coded by what year things were built. So the things in the middle are primary spillway. Over here, built in pink were built in 1935. As City Manager Swallow talked about in 1968, these side walls were not here, these gates were not here. It rained, it overflowed the dam, and it took out all the earth next to it, and it failed. It remained that way for quite a few years, I understand from people who were around here. We rebuilt it with these radial gates in 1973. I want to talk a little bit about, this is a very important point, this dam does not provide any flood control. We, DPW, have to go out and open up these gates every time it rains. These gates are what now, being able to open up the gates will prevent the other earth and embankment failure because we can allow the gates open up and water comes underneath them. So it rained this weekend, we opened the gates 3 inches, for instance. Another component of the dam is the impoundment. This is everything that is behind the free, so the river obviously is free flowing. At one point a dam's put in, it stops up all the flow upstream of the dam. This is the current impoundment area. Here, Mill Pond Park, this is from 2024 aerial. This aerial on the right is just, oops, oh, I did not mean to do that. Area on the right is just a cool picture of what it looked like in 1975 when the city was bypassing the dam to grade and add what we now consider to be the dog park and the rock area of Mill Pond Park. So all of this area here was added in the 70s, and this is just happened to be an aerial that was taken at the same time we found in historic archives. As we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation, dams do drop sediment on the upstream side of them, and so as part of this dam removal feasibility study, we did a survey of the sediment that's built up in this impoundment, and this is just a color-coded estimate of how deep we think the sediment is throughout the impounded area, and we think we have about 7,400 cubic yards of sediment currently built up behind the dam. Reasons for dam removal. I'm going to take these in pieces. I think everyone's aware we did a dam removal feasibility study. Why did we do that? A big one is safety and liability. Dam owners are responsible for all the liability associated with the dam. The next 3 go together. It's not uncommon as the asset gets longer that you have more occurring costs with said asset. That's happening. This dam is getting older now. It wasn't screaming for help. It's not uncommon for deferred maintenance of other things that are screaming for attention to get put to the top of the burner. And we are facing increasing regulations as we get more increasing storm events, as we modify how much we design the spillway capacity for. We, the dam owner, are getting increasing regulations too in regards to dam. The next 2 bullets here, effective asset management. This is something that I feel, I guess, very strongly about as far as the engineer for a city that owns a lot of old stuff. Effective asset management, the first thing you want to understand is what you own. The second thing is what condition is it in, And the third thing is how much investment do you need, how much useful life do you have left in it before you do capital reinvestment? So when you're looking at all the stuff the city owns, what do we own, how much does it cost to maintain it, and before we reinvest money into an asset, understanding what that useful life of said asset is. And unfortunately, this asset is no longer serving its original purpose. And we have lots of other old assets that need the time and attention and resources of city staff. So that's a large portion of one of the reasons for dam removal. And then lastly, I guess we're talking about just the environmental portion. I'm gonna totally summarize here, but in general, dam removals, or dams are bad for the environment in general. Removing them is good, and I'll let, I guess, Aaron get in a little more into that. And I don't know if you want this mic.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Actually, I'll switch up.
All right. Can you hear me okay? All right, good. I'm Aaron Snell. I'm co-owner of Streamside Eco. I have been working on studying rivers for some grad school, so about 2000. Rivers, dams, how fish move around barriers, and that sort of thing. So I got started here with the city of Saline 2 years ago maybe, and I did some data collection. I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, but more so I'm going to talk about some of the pros and cons of having a dam, and maybe not an environmental assessment. As you see on the screen, that's a pretty broad term in my mind. So what I'm focusing on is more of an ecological aspect, ecological assessment. So the fish, the other aquatic animals, the birds, anything that might live around the dam, live in the river, live in the impoundment, how does the dam affect them and their habitat? So this is a lot to look at, and I don't expect you to read all the fine print on here. All right, so this just is a pretty basic diagram of, on top, a free-flowing river with no dam or impoundment. And on the bottom, that would be the river with the dam, so in this case, Saline Dam. All right, so the impacts that dams have on rivers are really well documented in the literature. This is a real hot button topic lately. Everywhere I go in the state, people are talking about their dams, what to do with their dams. And I worked on maybe 30-ish dam projects, all right, ranging from dam removals to dam relicensing, where you have a dam that's actually creating hydropower and they have to relicense you for. I've worked on everything in between, modifications, fish acid projects. I've studied the impact of dams on aquatic organisms. So that free-flowing river that you see on top, rivers have several jobs. One of their primary jobs is to transport the water and the sediment from the watershed. Rivers depend on sediment. They need sediment in them. There is such thing as excessive sediment, but there's also such thing as not enough sediment. So there's an equilibrium in the river. The sediment goes bouncing down the stream. Leaves go bouncing down the stream. Sticks, woody debris, algae, zooplankton, it all goes bouncing down the stream. And that continuum from the headwater down to the mouth of the stream, all of these individual components are important for not only river function, but for biological function. Obviously, the dam can be an impediment for fish migrating upstream. Either sturgeon populations are decimated because of dams that were built. Salmon are a poster child. Salmon run upstream, out west for thousands of miles, and they hit a dam and they can't go any further to get to their spawning grounds. So, in that bottom picture, you see some of the impacts that a dam can have on a river. Not only the fish migration upstream, but fish can have a problem moving downstream to the dam. The impoundment collects everything that headwater would be transporting down through the system. So in the case of your mill pond, it's filling in over time, it's getting shallower. With that fine sediment, you have nutrients and who knows what else attached. You know, the contaminants, we'll call them, they attach to the sediment particles, they settle out in the impoundment. So when the river just downstream of the dam doesn't have that sediment, it falls out of equilibrium, and it will actually start to erode the banks so that it has sediment in it. It needs the sediment. Complicated concept, I think, but that's kind of, you know, the elementary version of how these rivers are functioning with and without a dam. So specific to your dams, specific to Saline Dam, there's not a lot of data that exists to do a full-blown ecological assessment. There's not a lot of data for the pros and cons of having that dam, but I think the next few slides will be interesting and hopefully informational. I sat down and I worked with Tasha and others to come up with some of the pros of this dam specifically. And it does appear to be a pretty nice habitat for waterfowl, wading birds, that sort of thing. Another potential pro here is that it does serve as a sink for sediment. So in a case where you've got a lot of farmland upstream and a heavy sediment load, maybe it's a good thing to have some of the sediment fall out. But even with that pro, is a potential con. The sediment is filling the impoundment in, right? So 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 300 years from now, we don't know. But that impoundment is going to be full, and it's basically going to convert back to a free-flowing river system through probably a wetland. You know, you're going to have a 30-foot river there, and that's just the process that these rivers go through. The cons. Fish populations are fragmented. And I have some data on the next couple of slides to show that that actually is happening. Water quality in the impoundment appears to be poor. Water can heat up in the impoundment. You often have algae blooms in an impoundment. In fact, I saw some. I've been out in the impoundment twice. And again, we don't have any data. We don't have any water quality data. I tried to find some. If you know any, please let me know. Based on my observations of the impoundment, when I was there, the water was turbid, it was muddy, it was hard to see through. There were algae blooms. Some algae is toxic. I don't know algae well enough to tell you what these were, but generally speaking, algae blooms happen when you have really warm water and a buildup of nutrients, both of which you have in this impoundment. It's full of waterfowl, which is nice to look at. You know, it's nice to have the habitat. It's nice to have the aesthetics. But waterfowl can also be detrimental. Right? I studied the E. coli contamination in streams throughout Michigan. In a situation like this, there's going to be E. coli contamination, and this water is not going to meet water quality standards, I can guarantee it. You've got non-native carp. Carp oftentimes are invasive. You see those in the impoundment. And the problem with carp is, as they swim around and feed on the bottom, they constantly resuspend that fine sediment and the nutrients in the water column. So that's one of the reasons that it's muddy out there. If you want the next slide, I talked too long in that one slide.
Yes.
There we go. All right. So some of the data that does exist, I reached out to DNR Fisheries, and they sent me some data that they have regarding the fish populations in the Saline River. They had a 1985 survey of the impoundment, so that's pretty dated. That's 40-year-old data. They did a survey of 2010 downstream of the dam, and they did another survey in 2011 upstream of the dam. They documented 33 different species of fish throughout throughout those surveys. 12 species in the impoundment, and the only species that were unique to the impoundment are the black crappie, which you see in the middle slide, and they found one yellow perch. So those are species that are kind of more oriented to standing water than they are flowing water. 21 species of fish were found in the river downstream of the dam, 20 species in the river upstream of the dam. This is the free-flowing river portions. The really interesting thing here is that of the 21 species found downstream of the dam, 9 of those are only found downstream of the dam. Of the 20 species found upstream of the dam, 9 species are only found upstream of the dam. All right, so there's 18 species total that are being blocked, presumably, by the dam. 18 out of 33 species. Those fish would otherwise move up and down the river system. Because the river habitat is quite similar upstream of the dam as it is downstream of the dam. Next one. So, I'm kind of moderate when it comes to dams. You know, I don't hate every dam like a lot of people do. I've worked on relicensing projects. Dams can have benefits environmentally, maybe not ecologically as much. But I've worked on, relicensing projects where they're making renewable, clean energy at a dam. The consensus among experts, you just met me today, you don't know me. You probably don't have any reason to trust me, really. The consensus among experts is that dams are detrimental to the ecosystem, to the aquatic ecosystem especially. Over my 25, 30 years of working, I've worked with all sorts of conservation groups, Trout Unlimited, there's Tippecanoe Watershed Council, there's American Rivers. I've worked with all the agencies that are in Michigan and the federal agencies that operate here, so DNR, Fisheries, Eagle, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Great Lakes Fisheries Commission. All of these folks support dam removal to restore the ecosystem. And there's only one exception that I can think of, and that's with the federal agencies, Fish and Wildlife Service and Great Lakes Fisheries Commission. They don't like to remove dams if they are a barrier to sea lamprey. All right, so sea lamprey in the Great Lakes, there's a whole history study. They've been terrible invasive species to have here. And when you have a lowermost barrier, or first barrier as we call it, so these fish, the sea lamprey will migrate out of Lake Michigan, for example, and they can move upstream until they hit the dam. The feds like to protect those dams because they provide a function of keeping the sea lamprey out, and that's still a really important tool in the battle against sea lamprey. This dam is not a sea lamprey barrier. I checked with DNR. It is a Milan, the dam in Milan. So the dam in Milan is the sea lamprey barrier on this system. So any fish from any sea lamprey coming out of Lake Erie in this case would be blocked by that dam. And the DNR said that there really isn't even a population of sea lamprey at that dam. So, just to wrap this up, if you don't believe me, if you don't believe the experts, there's a tendency toward that lately. If you want to do your own research type of thing, just go out and Google how do dams benefit fish. I tried it. Most of the information you're going to find is that maybe they have some short-term benefit, if any. And most of those benefits are related to when you have a pond that's deep, it can support a population of fish and a fishery. There's a lot of dams that have, it's basically a lake behind them that people go out there and fish, and there's a variety of species. But you read the last part of that, and it says, but the long-term ecological consequences often outweigh these benefits. While generally considered detrimental to migratory fish, they provide stable, deeper water environments for non-migratory lake species. That's all I have. If there's some questions at the end, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Aaron.
No, that's not all I have.
Oh, cool.
I was afraid I was gonna forget something. I mentioned there's not a lot of data available, and you might be asking why at this point is there not data available. Typically, this process of a city or a municipality or anyone else working through this decision on whether to remove a dam, a lot of the data collection actually really comes later, because if it were to be collected now before a decision's even made, that would be a fairly significant expense that might warrant nothing. So how these typically work is, if the city were to decide that removing the dam sounds good, there would be requirements, city manager Swallow mentioned, to permitting, that's one of them, legal permitting, but there are also requirements associated with ecological impact studies. So we would have to study the impact on threatened and endangered species, wetlands in great detail, the mussels. I did a bit of a preliminary mussel survey a year or two ago, and there's a threatened species that lives in the river upstream of the dam. Detailed mussel survey would be required. And if there's any federal funding put toward this project, it's very likely that a full-blown environmental assessment will be required. Anytime the federal government spends money on this type of thing, you know, a full report on how it impacts the environment, and in some cases, the socioeconomics and a few other things.
Thank you. So next I just have a few slides. One of the biggest things we heard in the dam removal feasibility study that was ultimately finalized in March of 25 was what would it look like if the dam were to be removed. These were presented to council back in October, but we just wanted to get them more formally out to the whole public. Everyone doesn't want to council meetings. So to get everybody oriented on this first slide, this is what we modeled. This is a version of what potentially the river channel would look like if the dam were to be removed. This is the park in yellow. Oh, okay, and then let me do this one more time. Did we get too long on one? It like freezes it up, right? Is it going away at least? I don't know if Sarah can now show the presentation, or no, is that too much?
Does she have a copy of it?
Yeah, she does. This is me going again. I'm just not gonna go through the actual full right. So that's big enough, right, for everyone in the room at least. Okay, so I was saying that the yellow is the parkland gained. I guess restart the river channel through here. The yellow being the parkland gained in Mill Pond Park on the southern end where the impoundment currently is. What you see in red here is the Saline River Valley Trail that's going in this summer. And then this pink is a potential expansion of the trail, ultimately going under the existing bridge under US 12 to get to Curtis Park. Up here on the top right of this is just a profile view of the modeled river, I should say, and the existing impoundment water level. So now I'm going to have to go through like this, aren't I? That works. Okay, so this is if you were standing on Saline River Drive right now. Saline River Drive looking out at US 12. This is the existing view with the impoundment. This is coming up the ridge, looking down at the potential river. That's what this slide is showing. I'm going to go to the next slide. This is when you're coming down US 12. So this is just looking, this is the existing dam, spillway, the radial gates we talked about earlier. This is the river, which is 50 feet wide in this rendering here, showing this is the future potential park pathway here, as I'm now moving and adjusting our slides as I'm talking. With the trail that's going in the summer way along the ridgeline beyond, where the river would go through underneath the existing bridge structure. I'm just going to go through a couple other slides fairly quickly here. This is just a potential amenity. This is an example from Dundee of the crossing below the M50 on the Saline River. We're thinking the same thing could occur here, potentially between Mill Pond and Curtis's Park, to provide a safe crossing between the two parks. This white cloud drawdown is something that Aaron was actually involved in. This was a dam that my understanding is they were putting some investment in, and ultimately Eagle required them to draw it down, which means lower the level of it a little bit. So this is showing the, if you will, mud that occurred shortly after the drawdown, and then this picture was taken 6 weeks after that in the same area. So I thought that was kind of cool. This is the Round Ridge Dam removal in Traverse City, just again showing that what it looked like in the first season of removal versus a couple seasons later that everything had greened up and grown back. Now, I do agree with no matter what we do here, if it's coffer damming and saving the dam or if it's removing the dam, it's going to come with a disruption to the park in a construction season. So even what we're proposing to do for the mill race coming up is going to be disturbing right to the site. So the intention of these slides are just to show even if we were to go forward with removal, ultimately Mother Nature would take over and the intent would not be to leave mud flat areas, no matter what. We want it to be a park-like setting. So now the real reason why we're here, right, one of the things that was asked of me also in addition to the feasibility study is really what would it cost to save this dam? So this is I think the crux of the meeting here over here, some of these things we printed out that Kevin's gonna go over here in a minute, and I'm just gonna lead in introducing to Kevin, give a little bit of background, and let Kevin get into all the boring assumptions and such to come up with those graphs. So I'm not gonna go through all of these, except that it takes a lot of staff time. Every year, there's requirements that we have to do as a regulatory agency for the dam it takes time to maintain and keep the structure. We estimate it takes about $68,000 a year on average for just the operation and maintenance of the dam. Before we get into the capital reinvestment, so we're separating out the cost, just to operate, maintain it versus what we have to repair, fix, capital reinvestment in it. I want to talk just for a minute about one of the big assumptions that we have in this. So I'm going to back up. This is a recent letter I got from Eagle, January 30th of this year. We are regulated by Eagle. We are liable for damages. We are one of 813 dams in the state of Michigan that are significant risk, that are regulated under either significant or hazard risks that are regulated under Part 315. The Michigan Dam Safety Task Force, which was organized in 2020 in response to the large failures up in Midland, is recommending changes to how much water our spillway needs to pass. That's the main structure of the dam. Their new stormwater regulations are coming down, basically saying that our spillway is will likely be too small. So we have gone ahead and one of the key assumptions is that we will lower that spillway by, I guess, what are the impacts of this regulation on our dam? That's what the next slide is. So this is the impacts to our impoundment from the revised requirements that are coming. We don't know how soon, but we know they're coming someday. That the spillway will need to be lowered by 2 to 3 feet. So this is the existing impoundment area right here. And this is the existing profile view of the impoundment area. And again, this is just a modeled profile view if we were to lower it 2 to 3 feet. So basically the entire impoundment area would come down a couple of feet. And those are the assumptions because that's the cheapest way or the most cost-effective way to maintain compliance. And once we did those graphs without chipping away the spillway and we were actually rebuilding the dam, repair the dam, just shot up. So this was the most cost-effective way to maintain the dam and repair and keep the dam. So I'm going to now turn it over to Kevin to go through the life cycle cost analysis.
Okay. Can you guys hear me okay?
No.
Can you hear me now?
No, it's not on.
Very well.
I'll make this short.
That's not. How about now?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so thank you, Tasha. My name is Kevin Willis. I'm from Spicer Group. I've been involved in studying this dam for several years now. And I get to talk about the boring assumptions and the dollar amounts.
No, I'm doing this on purpose. I think we're going to be able to get through your pretty slides with it.
So, let's start with capital reinvestment needs. So, obviously, we talked a lot about the costs of dam removal versus dam repair. I'm going to talk a little bit in more detail about that in the next few slides. So, of course, removing the dam is a very significant upfront cost. The repairs that are necessary for the dam are also significant, but they are less in the short term. What's necessary in the short term for dam repairs would include repairing the intermediate pier walls. If you remember in one of the earlier slides, I think it was Tasha walked through the components of the dam. They're basically the original retaining walls that are, you can see them on either side of the principal spillway. Both of those walls are deteriorating, and since our Spicer's first dam inspection in 2020, there's actually noticeable deterioration since that time, so it is actively getting worse. It's not, I wouldn't say that it's an emergency at this time, but it is concerning enough that we should do something if the dam is to remain in place. Additionally, on we'll call it the floor of the spillway, there's a joint that is separated, and there's actually sediment blowing up out from the joint, leaving a void under the dam, which is a structural concern, stability concern. Tasha mentioned lowering the spillway impoundment, and she's right. We believe the most cost-effective way of improving the capacity of the dam to pass flow is to actually lower the spillway, which would draw down the impoundment of people. So currently, we're also investigating the mill race. There's no good records of physically what the mill race is. We can't find any records about elevations, and currently we can't safely get down in the mill race to inspect it. So we're actually working with the city right now on investigating the mill race and possibly performing some repairs. For example, the stop logs that are in the mill race, which assist the principal spillway with controlling the level of the lake, have failed. So right now there's temporary measures in place that need to be upgraded to more permanent solutions. And then the last thing on here for short-term rehabilitation is slope stabilization on the dam embankment. If you remember, City Manager Swallow earlier mentioned that the dam had failed at some point. I think it was in 1968. And that failure was actually the earthen embankment. So the green lawn that you see as you drive down US 12 is actually a structural.
The Star Trek mythos has certainly had its ups and downs, but almost every showland movie has had the good fortune to be played by terrific actors.
Anyway, I'm also going to talk a little bit about recurring maintenance repairs that would be necessary in the future. If you keep the dam in perpetuity, that also comes with future rehabilitation needs and improvements over time. So those could include gate refurbishment, gate seal replacement, gate hoist improvements. And I wanted to point out, because in our last town hall, we had discussed the fact that the impoundment is filling with sediment over time. It has been filling with sediment for several decades, and it will continue to do so as long as the dam is in place. We had talked about, or there has been some conversation or comments online and media, what have you, about dredging the impoundment to remove that sediment that has accumulated. We did not include that in any of these costs. It's a very substantial cost to do something like that. It also requires permitting from Eagle. And quite frankly, we're not certain that you would get a permit just to dredge the impoundment for the sake of dredging the impoundment. I forgot that I wasn't in front of the So first I'll start with talking about the cost over 50 years projected of dam removal. So just to help get everyone's bearings on this chart, and I apologize, the text might be a little bit hard to see from far away, but across the bottom are years into the future. Across the left are cumulative investment or expenditures from the city. I want to point out that we are not accounting for inflation in any of these estimates. We just can't estimate that for 50 years. So to keep it simple, we excluded inflation. And across the bottom, we did not include calendar years just because we don't know specifically when the decision will be made. But it's kind of based on the assumption that a decision would be made this year, but just because year one there is an investment. So in the first 2 years, we're including the $800,000 for mill race exploration and repairs. It's a very rough preliminary estimate. It's not something that is necessarily occurring yet, but it is something that will likely be necessary very soon. And then over the next 5 years, mostly in years 4 and 5, is a $3.8 to $5 million investment to actually remove the dam. That would include engineering, permitting, studies that Mr. Snell mentioned earlier, and the actual physical removal of the dam itself. So from years 6 through 50, the gradual increase in cost over time, or accumulated expenditures over time. We had worked with city staff to estimate how much it would cost the city, basically in staff and equipment time, to maintain a lawn if the additional parkland from removing the impoundment were to be reverted to just green grass. That's obviously an assumption. You don't have to revert it to green grass. It could be something like a meadow that's not maintained. It would save you costs on that. Or if you were to add park amenities, it could increase costs, but for the sake of keeping things simple, we just left it as a green lawn. So at the end of a 50-year cycle, we're projecting $5.8 to $6.9 million expenditure over the course of that 50-year period. So how that compares to repairing the dam and adding capacity. The x-axis and the y-axis are the same on these two charts. Still 50 years, still $0 to $11 million, bottom to top. The blue shaded space is a range of approximately what we would estimate the expenditures would be. Obviously, there's a larger blue space, meaning there's more variability in our assumptions. But you can see just from the bullet points, there's a lot more things that cost the city money over the course of 50 years. So in this, we still have the $800,000 in the next couple of years for mill race exploration and repairs, but then a $1.1 to $1.4 million project in years 4 and 5 for dam repairs. Obviously, that's a much lower cost than removing the dam. We also included $500,000 to $1 million for shoreline stabilization. And then all of the rest of those bullets are recurring expenses that the city would have to cover. So that includes about $3,500 for dam inspections that by law are required every 3 years for the Saline River Dam. $5,000 every 6 years for an underwater inspection. $1.5 million for gate refurbishment, and we have that listed at a 25 to 50 year cycle. So you can see the jump at year 9, which is the second big jump on the top side of the blue shaded area. That would be refurbishing the radial gates about 10 years from now. And then the jump again, farther to the right on the top of about year 35, that would be assuming that you had to refurbish the gates every 25 years. They can probably last longer than that, and that's why there's a top and a bottom. So the jump in the bottom of the blue at about year 30 is if it only needs to be refurbished every 50 years. Maybe you only have to do it once in this 50-year cycle. But it's a safe assumption that you will have to refurbish the gates at some point in the next 50 years, possibly more than one. The other costs here, $60,000 for gate seal replacement every 20 to 30 years, $50,000 gate hoist improvements. That's actually a short-term, one-time thing. But to improve the hoists, really what we're looking at is motorizing the lift mechanism. Ms. Humphreys mentioned earlier that the gates were raised 3 inches, I think last weekend, due to the storms. Those gates are not easy or fast to open. It takes several turns and sometimes 2 people to turn the wheel just to raise the gate 1 inch. So if a large, fast storm comes through, you're hoping that DPW gets there in time to open the gates early enough. let's see, so we have hoist motor replacement, I just touched on, every 20 to 30 years. So if you install those motorized hoists, the motors only last so long and they'll have to be replaced. Every 5 years, you should be exercising the radial gates, just making sure that they actually do function the way that they're meant to. And then the real kicker is the operations and maintenance costs. That's just the everyday things that your DPW has to do, following their emergency action plan. So that's things like tabletop exercises, functional exercises, making sure, like drills, making sure that everybody at DPW, all the emergency services, a contact tree, notifying the city of Milan when you open the gates, all of that stuff. Everybody in DPW has to know how to do it. They have to be practiced in it. Just everyday maintenance needs, greasing the gears, things like that. Those costs add up pretty significantly, and we worked with DPW to estimate what those costs would be, and we came up with $68,000 every year. So, Tasha, if you flip back one slide, that's $68,000 every year compared to the $23,000 for mowing the lawn. It kind of makes mowing the lawn not seem like such a crazy cost. So then, just to kind of compare those two, we overlaid the two estimates over the 50-year period. Again, the axes are the same. And it's pretty apparent that in the long term, it does save the city substantial dollars over a 50-year cycle and into perpetuity if the dam is removed, just because you're removing the liability, you're removing everyday things that you have to spend money on. You're removing future rehabilitation projects, etc. So to summarize that, to really boil it all down, the high cost of removing the dam is offset by the higher recurring costs of having a dam over the course of approximately 10 to 35 years by our estimation. And that was the last of my.
So that covers the main issues that we want to talk about this evening. And at this point, we just want to talk a little bit about what are the next steps and how we proceed from here. So as was mentioned, we do have regular recurring inspections of the dam every 3 years. So that actually occurs in 2026. So that'll be a good update this year to understand exactly the condition of the dam. We are going to request from Eagle exactly how we might have to modify the dam in the future relative to flows. We talked about the mill rates. We do need to investigate there. As was mentioned, the stop loss failed this year, and so there's some additional investigation. And we want to understand what the elevation of that is and what the condition of it is, because we have not been able to inspect that to date. We want to engage with our other committees and commissions of the city here for their comment, and then ultimately city council's decision as to how to pursue this going forward, whether it be remediation or rehab and or removal. So with that, basically, that's again the next steps, and we did want to open up this evening to questions, comments, concerns, and so with that, I know Councilman Rice is here this evening to help as well. We can move the mic around, and so if you just raise your hand, that will probably be the best. And we'll try to get everyone, and I'm going to walk to the back of the room, and we'll look see if we have any questions coming in from online.
And please state your name, please.
All right, hopefully I can be heard. Mary Widener, and my greatest concern with all of this is that I noticed for both of the options, inflation wasn't accounted for. We know not only the cost of the things that are going to have to be removed, but the maintenance, the people power basically can't. I mean, right now there are a lot of factors at the moment that will affect the cost of this removal. As far as the rehabilitation of the dam, I noticed that there were a lot of things that were priced in. However, for the removal, there was nothing on the maintenance and getting the park to the state that it is a park again after. And that is going to cost a lot of money. It's going to be a lot of years of maintenance, and there will be mud pits. It will just be a mess down there. I also noticed that even though dams usually, for the most part, are considered, they're ecologically, it's probably best to remove them. A lot of the dams in Michigan are used for recreational use, and there are a lot of species there. Again, didn't hear anyone mention, like turtles, snakes that are endangered, and they do go through that area. And there are scientific findings reviewable by the University of Michigan's data that they exist here in the area and do use that area for reproduction and just living there. So those are some factors that I noticed they weren't addressed, and I'd really like to know because we don't have a whole lot of money to throw at this, and I would really hate to have everything removed, it turn into mud pits, and then invasive plants take over all of the area because it's a lot of acreage, and that usually is what happens with these projects. And yeah, that's pretty much my concern. Although I do have one question is, wouldn't it be in our best interest to review it in the future, like rehabilitate now? And while the economy is so unsure with all the construction and maintenance costs, wouldn't it be in the city and city or citizens' best interest to wait and reevaluate like 5-10 years down the road?
Tasha, I think that's a good question to answer, with the timeliness of all this.
So just one comment relative to some of the removal costs did involve reshaping the channel and creating a floodplain so that you don't get the mud pit scenario. So that does include some costs for moving dirt to recreate to reshape the channel. And obviously one of the concerns is that yes, I mean the initial costs for rehab is less than removal, and so that needs to be taken into consideration. Obviously, you see the blue line for rehab is lower than the red line till you get out at least about, you can see where they cross over, kind of that 17 to 18 year mark. So that is definitely a consideration.
Hi, I'm Sarah Brabbs. I live in York Township in this area, and I just wanted to say first, I really appreciate the city of Saline taking so much time and getting a grant to be thoughtful and fiscally responsible for what is and what may become of what is. I'm not sure if everyone read the 50+ PDFs with all the different research and things that have gone on for years that they have on their website, but I don't know if you know that's wetland area, and that's a whole ecological system that actually would be much more environmentally friendly if it was returned. So one thought I had was if owners and landowners would like to pay for any risk and future repairs that will probably happen because of this climate, because of natural disasters. I love the dam. I put videos up. I spent the last 2 days with a little chunk of time here. I love it. And also, I can see how it might be time to think about really letting it go. And it certainly seems, even though it's a short-term, pretty steep investment, the risk is much more mitigated, and the long-term financial risk especially is increased. And I just want to say one more thing. I don't know if you're aware of how Saline got the data center to not be part of Saline, but it is a few miles west down Michigan Avenue. There are hundreds of gravel trucks, as I'm sure you're all aware, going by every day on the dam. And of course, this feasibility study was done before that. But there's a lot of information where you can just stand there and watch what happens to the dam and the road when all of them drive by. So that's ongoing, it's been going on. And if you don't know, they skipped an environmental impact report. They didn't give a shit about the environment on that end. They destroyed wetlands, they destroyed the ecosystem. 28 football fields of buildings.
Can we stick with the dam? Can we stick with the dam?
Not to say.
No, stick with the dam. Stick with the dam.
What I'm saying is, you actually have a unique opportunity to do so much better in the same watershed. Like we probably could have recreation, there's probably a path for your future joy.
I appreciate it. Did you have a question? Sure.
No, I want to talk.
Come on up.
I got a question? No, I want to talk. I'm Lyle Goodrich out of Lodi.
Yeah, put that right by your mouth. There you go. Perfect.
All right. On any of the studies or whatever, why haven't you drained that pond already to take a look at what you have? You can open the floodgates and just drain it. I did that in Dundee's Dam in 1967 when I was 15. We had a Perry boy, went over the dam, drowned it, couldn't find him. December 26th was his birthday, drowned on his birthday, couldn't find nothing. So my dad was a cop in Dundee for 9.5 years, so he had the plan, take me out there to the dam, open the gate, drain the water behind the dam about halfway down. So we let it drain, and he took me back out. I shut the gate, and by the time the water starts coming back up, there's no water going downriver towards Monroe, and he found his son then. That's what Dad's plan, that you could find him. So that was the same thing here, we could do.
To answer your question real quick, the short answer is we are not authorized to lower the level. There would be a permit from the state of Michigan, from Eagle. There's also, I understand, a court set level. And so it would also probably require the court to weigh in on allowing us to lower that even on a temporary basis. So permitting requirements is why we can't do that. On top of that, as was mentioned by Aaron, a little bit, just we'd have to look at what the impact would be to the species that we know are there. And so there would be some additional studies for that. So it would be an expensive proposition just to.
Well, you could let me do that. I didn't have to have a permit, and I just went out and did it and saved a
I
kid.
just want to add to that. My general understanding, I'll let these guys speak to it, but even if we were to get a drawdown, it would be very limited in how much we could draw down per day. It would have to be monitored. It would be a very expensive undertaking.
I don't know how long it took to dry, the Raisin River. But I got it done, got it done. He found his, found his son, so it worked out nice. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And then a bit for the cost of taking out the dam, what bids, are you satisfied with what you got, or still taking bids for
It's
that?
not been bid out yet. It's engineer's
Okay.
estimate.
You're just guesstimating that it would cost that much.
All of
Okay.
these, none of these are bid prices, these are all estimates, and the cost opinions of costs that go with the removal estimates are included in the 800 pages of documents available online with the feasibility study.
Right.
So that's where that came from, is that feasibility study.
Now, what do you have for a grant?
The feasibility study was a grant we got a grant for the feasibility study, which has now been completed.
But not for the dam removal, nothing.
Correct, there's option, we did not include any grant, we purposely withheld, although we are likely to get some funding to knock down that, incline a little bit, we did not include that in this analysis.
Okay. And that last lady, what you was talking about, all those trucks, I went from here to Clinton, 30 trucks passed, just from that point, so we're not talking about that.
You talk about the trucks going over the dam? Sure. Yeah.
My name is Margaret Vandelos. I live on Bennett Street, and I fully support removing the dam because I'm looking at the cost over time. I mean, 9,000 people live in Saline. I looked that up, and it's very expensive. And I just don't know how we could maintain that and keep it in good repair. So I fully support removing the dam and sort of redoing it. So I just wanted to put my 2 cents worth in.
Let's set up this side of the room. Anyone over here?
Thanks so much. My name's Scott Mayer. I live over on Pondview. I overlook the dam and the pond every day. So I really appreciate the time and effort you put into this study. I'm just wondering, how much have we spent on maintenance over the last 10 years? Because that is, there's a big portion of the cost, roughly 30% of that cost, that you're estimating for removing the dam, or keeping the dam, I should say, 68,000 a year times 50 years, $3 million. That's, yeah, exactly. And then, how much have we spent on maintenance over the last 10 years?
I'll tell you, we have not, I mean, we've gone into this before, like, we've been asked this before, I mean, I've only been here a few years, but we weren't tracking the costs associated with dams separately, so there's.
Yeah. I mean, that's where.
But it's not uncommon, I mean, this is a structure, I don't know, maybe I'll let,
Well, I think,
yeah.
I think what you're getting at is there's not been a lot of capital investment over the last 10 years.
That's fair.
Everybody in this room would agree with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. So right now, though, but in terms of, you're making your little chart here with your red and blue, and you're saying that there's roughly a $20,000 and $60,000 difference per year over 50 years. That's the advantage of sitting up here in the front row. You can study this graph for a couple of minutes. But I'm just wondering, like, you haven't put money into the dam over the last 10 years.
More than 10 years. You should probably read the reports.
Respect whoever's got the microphone. So I guess what I'm wondering is, we've got some optional assessments here. We're including that, sort of raising that price up. And then on the other estimates, there's not a lot of granularity in the $5 million that it's going to take to remove the dam. So I think that's the hard part to really understand, is really what the true costs are, when it's just one lump sum, and then we've got all these other numbers in fine detail here.
I guess if I'm being honest with you, I'm assuming that the dam removal costs are probably still a little high, because I mean, all of it is material management and permitting. It's actually a much simpler project than repairing and rehabilitating the dam. It all has to do with sediment management, repairing the painful channel. That's all of the cost of dam removal, again, as outlined in the feasibility study. So I think that, I do think that I do think that every bullet on here is a bare minimum to maintain the dam. I do not envision that these were elevated at all. In fact, this is our smallest trajectory of maintaining the dam in all of our analyses that we went through in preparation for this meeting. All the other assumptions, the line got steeper and steeper and steeper. So I would say, if I'm looking broadly at this analysis, that's, I guess, my broad, and that's why we put the ranges of years in the assumptions. And I also, I guess I don't know if you want to talk more about the maintenance or anything.
I think you're not wrong in that there's deferred maintenance that, investment should have been made prior to this. But we're not ignoring that for the future. Recognize the fact that, reinvestment would have to happen in order to keep the dam.
Yeah.
I'm Mark Hayner, I live on Cinder Drive. I just wanted to, point out that over a 50-year span, costs are indeed higher. The near-term cost, if you look at these charts and where they intersect, over the next 10, 15 years, there's a substantially higher cost of removing the dam than rehabilitation. It's not until we get onto the 20, 30, 40-year span that we're looking at significantly increased costs. So we're looking at a significant investment as far as cost in the near term, rather than over the next 50 years.
Correct.
I was just wondering, obviously outside funding is likely to be needed for this or be prioritized. How much do you anticipate having for the short-term removal versus what could potentially come down the line for if you were to choose the rehabilitation route? Like, what would the contrast be, and what type of grants, funding from the state or federal level? Is there a difference in what the city perceives the funding could be?
The short answer is yes. Obviously, once a decision is made, we want to pursue funding for either rehabilitation or removal. It's pretty well, and I'll let maybe Spicer or maybe Streamside talk to it, because they're in the business. I'm not, that there's generally more funding available for removal because of some of the ecological advantages that have been noted. And so when you apply for grants, you're going to get a higher priority or better chance of obtaining funding for removal. And
I just want to add to that real quick before we pass on. Yes, our research has indicated that we had some data in the feasibility study about the different funding analysis that may be applicable to removal. The other thing for rehab that I guess hurts us is that our dam is rated as a significant risk, not a high hazard risk. So there's less funding for rehabilitation available for the medium risk dams. If we had a high risk dam, there would be more funding available for rehabilitation. So do you want to say anything about the removal you were?
I'll just add one quick thing. Mr. Swallows and Ms. Humphries are both correct. There's generally more funding available for dam removals, and there's generally more funding available, or you're more likely to score well in a grant application if you're a high risk or high hazard dam instead of a significant hazard dam. But with that said, we haven't gone through an application process to remove the dam or rehabilitate the dam because the decision has not yet been made. And obviously, I don't think Spicer or city staff wants to be presumptuous of what decision council would make at this time. So once the decision is made, we can proceed with applications for whichever grant is most appropriate. And if funding is not available, then there might come a day that it has to be reassessed, and maybe the decision has changed. I don't know, but you know, it comes down to
Excuse me, I'm next. My name is Jack Foley. I've lived here since, well, actually I was born the same year the dam was built. So I'm the oldest person here. I have experience doing all kinds of things. But I tell you, this situation right now is you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So what I would suggest, if it was me, I opened up 40 stores, okay? I did it all myself. You gotta think about this, because right now, our situation with the dam out there, that data center rather, with the data center, with the dirty water you got in Saline, you got major problems. You better address all of them, not piecemeal. You got a major problem bringing people here to live with dirty water. And you're talking about the dam. I think the dam right now can wait till a little more stable times, because understanding when I was born, a house cost $3,000, okay? But that same house today is $400,000 made of nothing. So if you want people to move here, to support, we have great things. That pond could be a fishing place for kids, but they're not on their damn phones. Teach them how to fish, how to do things. Make it a real park. Fix the dam. Fix the dam, because in the long run, if you don't have the dam, you don't have the pond. It adds to the city's beauty. This thing, it was a fishing hole to bring kids in. You could charge a nominal fee to cover the maintenance of just maintaining the parcel of the park. So with that, I always say, I don't know if it's good or bad, but I do know it requires more thought than charts. You got to get all the people to vote in Saline to vote on these issues. But you've got 3 issues. You got the data center, which is terrible, terrible. But you've got dirty water, which is terrible. And then you've got the data. All I can say is Jan. Yes. Amen.
All right. I had kind of a question related around why we're doing all these assessments at this time. Could you sort of talk to that, why we're doing this now, why we're doing these things now?
I strongly believe that data-based decisions before reinvesting large millions of dollars in our assets will save us millions of dollars in the long run. So I think the more data we can collect on all of our assets and make capital reinvestment decisions based on said data, the better off we're going to be. And I agree with what the gentleman just said. We have a lot of aging infrastructure. I've lived here before the new RO plant was online. I lived here now when we since we've had the RO plant. The water quality, the RO plant is better than it was back before. So I agree we have aging infrastructure issues throughout the city, but I guess I'm looking at getting all the data available for all the pieces of infrastructure. So we are spending our money on essential first and working our way down to safety and then community enhancement. That would be my recommendation.
We do have an online question, so I want to pass the mic to Sarah.
All right, does the Parks Commission or Council have or ever had a vision or long-range plan for the better use of Mill Pond itself within the Mill Pond Park?
What a timely question. So actually, Councilwoman Rice might be able to answer that better than anyone, because she serves on council and the Parks Commission. And Sarah's here, so I know the Parks Commission is going to be presenting coming up on the 16th, correct?
Next Monday, and Director Lambert is here as well. Many Parks Commissioners are here. The Parks Commissioners have worked tirelessly to put together a plan for a future visioning for Mill Pond. We're gonna present that to council. We've taken some tours of other parks, and we kind of just, did our hopes and dreams for Mill Pond Park. That way we have something that we can work toward in the future. We're gonna have lots of open conversations with folks over the next year or so. But yeah, if anyone wants to attend our meeting next Monday, Parks Commissioner will be presenting some of the things that we think would really improve the park altogether. No matter if we remove the dam or not, things can be adjusted. But we wanted to kind of do that simultaneously so that we're talking about, our most prestigious park as a whole.
And just to point out on all the graphs, you'll note that removal or rehab is still 2 to 3 years out. We realize that once a decision is made, we want to pursue as much outside funding, state and federal funding as we can, and also obviously we talked about the permitting process for either option. So we're still 2 to 3 years out from something significant happening on the dam, but we need to make a decision so we can move towards it.
My name's Derek Grossman. I live downriver and have property along the Saline River, downriver from Saline. I also worked for the city for 35 years and have turned those wheels to open those gates many a time. And it is never opened on every rain event. Sometimes it goes for years without being opened. It should be exercised, but I've seen many years go by without opening those gates, so it's not done regularly. One thing I've seen in tonight's report and the one about removal is I see a lot of words like estimate, potential, and assumption. And a quick definition of assumption is the thing that is accepted as true or as certain to happen without proof. And that puts, you're throwing numbers around for both removal and saving it, but they're all estimates. There's no hard numbers for people to make a decision on. Some of your estimates are extremely high, like you have refurbishing the gates and putting new seals on at $1,560,000. That very work was done in 2005 for $134,000. In today's dollars, that would be $224,000. So your estimate is extremely high, and it may be indicative of all your estimates. And as far as the Michigan Dam Safety Task Force that was organized in 2020, it was dissolved in 2021. So there is no real legislation coming because most of their recommendations require legislative authority to enact. And one of the reasons it's probably not likely to happen is the DNR owns 200 to 280 dams in Michigan. So they're shooting themselves in the foot to enact some of these things. And the EGLE requirement for 2026 that you mentioned, I called them after your October 6th meeting, and they said typically that raises the amount of water 10 to 20% is what they've seen, and the Saline Dam would be well capable of handling that. I also asked them, because in this report tonight, you have that EGLE requires maintenance of a minimum standard, and on that standard, you have reconstructed the spillway to the lower crest. I also asked EGLE about that, and they said that is not mandatory, that is an option they suggest. So you have it down here as mandatory, so that's incorrect. There's a number of other things that you've got in here that are just extremely costly with no facts behind them. So, some of my questions are the comment about going under the bridge for MDOT. You say that's a potential amenity. It seems like you would have looked into that long ago because that enhances taking it out. but has anyone got MDOT's approval to take, to walk under that bridge? It appears that they do not. So a lot of these things really need to have solid numbers on them. And Eagle has sent you a letter and saying all they want is the left and right intermediate piers with a focus on the trunnion pin anchor locations, repaired and developing a plan for corrective action. So why don't you get solid bids on those three things that Eagle actually wants? And that's all you need to do to carry this dam to a future date.
I'll start. I guess the short answer is obviously, we have to rely on estimates because we don't have detailed engineering plans, and we want to, provide the best estimates we can. That's why we have consulted with engineers that work on these projects, work on other projects, and have completed these projects in the field. So they have experience with that. In terms of the Eagle regulations, I mean, obviously that task force was designed around addressing what the recommendations are, and then Eagle is tasked with implementing those. So it is, proceeding through Eagle's regulation, and there's also a pending bill in the state legislature that deals with this as well. So that is ongoing. It is proceeding. I suggest you mentioned MDOT. Something tells me they would prefer not to have a dam right above US 12 if they didn't have to. And so, yeah, so there's some concerns, and that's why we are a higher risk as a dam because it could wash out well if it failed. So there's some concerns there from MDOT that have been expressed in terms of, I think they're, again, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I think, that's one of the reasons we are a higher risk dam. So with that, I will turn it over to those that actually worked on the actual dollars and cents of developing those estimates.
I was just going to mention specifically the bridge that was evaluated as part of the feasibility study. Maybe if you want to expand on it, Kevin. But the bridge is owned by MDOT, not MDOT. US 12 is an MDOT road. MDOT owns the bridge as to which is directly downstream of the dam. That bridge we have looked at the height of the river and the design of the bridge. It does appear that we could get pedestrians under there. So yeah, that homework we did do as part of the feasibility study. I guess as far as you're saying to get actual bids in hand costs, like you were saying, that would be when we're getting ready to do a project. A coffer dam, for instance, we have a bid in hand right now for the coffer dam at the mill race. That's $300,000 for just a little mill race. So if we were to coffer dam the main spillway, I imagine it would be it's much larger area that would have to be coffer dammed. I guess I'm gonna turn it over to Kevin to speak maybe about the gates.
What's a coffer dam?
Oh, sorry. Sorry, coffer dam is the temporary steel plates that you see put in vertical to basically hold back the water. It's a temporary it's a temporary dam to keep the water away from whatever structure we would be working on.
And the reason we mention that is to do any work on the spillway or, for example, the raceway, we would have to have a coffer dam to seal that off temporarily to be able to do the work. Obviously, you can't pour concrete in water. So.
This dam has a built-in coffer dam. If you want to look at it, it has channels on the pier walls that go to the lake, and the plates are done DPW. They're at the barn. You let you slip them in, or tubes that go in there, so that you don't need a coffer dam. Build a coffer dam. We have one in place. We have a way to do it now. So you can take that cost off your list.
That's not quite the same thing as a coffer dam. So those are stop blocks that only isolate the radial gates.
Before, to replace the seals on the radial gates, they put that built-in coffer dam in.
Correct. So those only isolate the gates. A coffer dam would isolate the entire concrete structure. So they're similar, but not quite the same thing. You can't do everything that you need to do with only the stop blocks. I just wanted to comment really quickly on the lowering of the spillway. So Eagle did not mandate that we lower the spillway right now. What that was in reference to is that at some point, you effectively will. There are recommendations from the Dam Safety Task Force to change the regulatory flow rates. And that report, I don't think is quite finalized yet, but Eagle has started using flow rates from it. We're working with them to try to understand that further, but we do know that the the flow rates for the Saline River Dam are expected to increase fairly substantially. Rich, what's the maximum that we've seen increase?
I don't know, it varies by region.
Just of all of the dams that Spicer has worked on, we've been tracking how much the flow rates have already changed.
Some have doubled.
Yes, some dams, their Eagle mandated flow rates have doubled. So there's a lot of different things kind of going on. I apologize if there was some confusion on that matter, but no, Eagle is not mandating right now that the capacity of the spillway increase right now. That's something that we're planning for in the future, because if the city of Saline is going to spend millions of dollars on improving their dam, a lot of that cost is just for the startup of doing the project. So things like installing the cofferdam, mobilizing cranes is extremely expensive. All of those things make the project cost substantially more just for the ability to do the actual work that's necessary. So there is an option to improve the dam without adding capacity, but when the time comes that you do have to add capacity in the future, you're basically spending all of that money all over again.
But you're when you have $1.5 million for the radial gates, where it was 134,000 20 years ago. So why is there such a discrepancy between those two things? And and the city still has the stop logs to put behind the gates to stop the water and do one gate at a time. So why is your figure $1.5 million compared to 244,000 today's dollars from 20 years ago?
I'm not specifically familiar with exactly what work was done in 2005 or what the scope of that was, what the estimates were. I can look deeper into what our estimates were. I can contact you later if you want to talk more.
Well, I just wondered, you had that specifically down there, and it was done much cheaper, but your figures are much higher.
We can look at that again.
You should listen to him. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. You all are not, I mean, you're politicians. Okay? Listen to him. Listen to him. They know what's happening. You guys are so, you're typical politicians.
No one at that desk is a politician. They work for us. They work for all of us, for our taxpayer dollars. They're working for us. So we have one more question over here, and then we move back to that.
Thank you. My name is Madeline Maloki. I live on Tower Drive, and full disclosure, I am a volunteer on the Environmental Commission. And I just wanted to say there's a lot of talk about doing just what's immediately necessary. And as a young person who has just moved into Saline and just bought a house a little less than a year ago, I don't want to think about just what we need to do right now. I really appreciate that the city is taking the time and their due diligence to look at what this means for the next 50 years, because I hope to be a resident for the next 50 years. And I want to know what I want to be informed when I make a decision and when I ask my representatives to vote here or there on such a big decision. Kicking the can down the road and just paying like $200,000 a year and $1 million there is exactly how we get into this situation with the wastewater treatment plant and it being a huge capital investment. And that's not something that I want this community to have to pay for. You know, I think we can all agree that we want our tax dollars to go towards things that are going to invest back into its community members. And if that's, you know, removing the dam or keeping the dam, that's great, but I want us to make an informed decision. And that's what I would want to do, and I think that's what we all want to do here. And I just want to echo what Nicole said earlier. These are all civil servants. These are people that have dedicated their careers into becoming experts so that they can be of service to you. They are not politicians, and they do not deserve your ire. Hi, I'm Lisa Gorlitz. I've lived here since I was 3, and I live on Clark Street now. So I could wax poetic about the pond. I really love it. I think it's a jewel of the city. It's beautiful in the fall, the way the trees reflect on the water.
it's stunning. I think my overall disdain for the way that this is going on is really about what someone alluded to earlier. It's about the overall, everything here. Everything here says we no longer have the financial burden of this critical infrastructure in perpetuity, a significant investment. I'm still very unclear, and I really did try and go look at our city budget. Where is the line item where our maintenance is for our infrastructure, and specifically the dam? And what have we spent, not in the next 50 years projected, but in the last 10, 15, or since we've owned it since the 1990s or had responsibility for it? I don't know that that data exists, but I would love an answer for that. Moving forward, I did hear, I think Mr. Wilkes, I heard you say an estimated like median of $65K a year, and that's the same number, Tasha, that you had mentioned as well. Is that an estimate, or is that what we actually have been spending? Because the two numbers align. Doesn't look like there's a delta there. If there is some sort of increase, maybe.
We're using the same numbers. Okay. We're both referring to this, I hope, yes. So this is what we went through. One of the things that council asked us to do after the dam removal feasibility study was really look at what it would take to save the dam. Like I said, I've learned a lot about the dam in the last 2 years since I've been doing this, and this is our list of everything it takes to maintain the dam on an annual basis on this. And that's where the estimate of $68,000. Now, some of these occur every 3 years, so we divide that by 3 years. Some of these occur every 5 years, we divided it by 5 years. So that's where we got with the $68,000 annual cost for money, and we were using the same data point.
Thank you. And I recognize that your environmental engineering firm, it looks like maybe. Civil engineering, there you go. I was looking at, like, I understand that you are here as the experts, right? The voices who looked into this. But we have been kicking the can down the road. We kicked it for so long that in fact now the solution is to cut our foot out. And my mom has always said, much to my irritation when I was little, that your failure to plan does not constitute an emergency on my part. And it's one of those situations where we haven't spent anything that I know of, or that I don't think people know of. And yeah, now it's going to be expensive. And we're not asking to put in a dam. Environmentally, probably not a great idea. We have a dam. It is our responsibility as a city to maintain our infrastructure so that we don't get to a point where something that was identified in a survey a couple years ago in an inspection doesn't get fixed. And then the next inspection, it's identified again and it says, hey, we pointed this out before. And this is why we are where we are. And I'm not a fan. I think that we need to really, this is not the solution. We are constantly trying to save money, and yet I think we contracted out our dispatch services. I think that passed. I know that I did look at the line items for the money we get on dispensaries and tax income and licenses. I know that we've done rental permits and inspections on an annual basis at the cost of the homeowner. That's a lot of fun too. So there's a lot of new income, and we're trying to save a lot of money, and yet nothing is different. Water costs more. Water is not brown. I do appreciate it, sincerely. But it is because of those types of things that I think that the trust of individuals, I'll speak for myself, is I'm just fix it. We should fix it. We need to fix it. Let's just move on and let's maintain our situation moving here. Thank you.
I'm Jack worked in and around city government and government work my entire career. So for about 50-some years. I've lived in Saline for 53 years. And I guess one of the things that always made me discouraged as a city employee, as a government employee, was the fact that we were expected to do a lot with very little. So a lot of those meetings was deferred, simply because we didn't have the funds to do it. Now we've got people in the seats who are running the city government are saying things have reached critical state, we need to take action now. We can accuse, they're not the people that kick the can down the road, they're the people who are trying to stop it right here, right now, and do something positive for the city. So I think we need to consider the fact that these folks have the best intentions of the city at heart, trying to correct some long-term problems.
I'd like to add one more thing too. I mean, aesthetics is a kind of something that we are considering. I mean, there, if the consensus is the aesthetic of the pond is better than a free-flowing river, and we want to invest to maintain that, that's something we do need to consider. Aesthetics is not wrong. I don't know how to value aesthetics.
But we do, and that's the point. Our point is, we have nice street lights downtown because the aesthetics matter. We replaced all of our trees when we did them, we replaced them with ginkgo. One, they grow slow, and two, they're beautiful and aesthetic and a little exotic. Those kinds of things matter, and they're, this is one of those things I think that as somebody who's been here, it matters. That's it. I'm sorry.
I have two comments to make. In 2021, I believe Eagle gave you a list of repairs that needed to be made. Is that correct?
Basically, Eagle copied what was in Spicer's 2021 structural inspection, yes, and sent it back to us.
Is it correct that nothing was really done?
No, actually, I would say out of the 10 things on that list, I could open it up, we got 6 of them, maybe? I don't know, but the several that the several that were immediate, it needed to be done, yes.
So we have like 4 left to do?
The larger ones, the more expensive ones, again, before the capital reinvestment, which, again, we didn't go over this in this presentation, but our dam is only currently rated as fair. I've said in the past, well, I said a couple of years ago, we have time, the word poor would be worse than fair. So our dam is currently in fair condition, so the remaining things need to be done in the near future, but are not going to be done yesterday.
And have we gotten bids for those things that still need to be done, or are we just doing this?
We are looking for direction. Go ahead.
Those estimates for rehab is exactly why we've had the engineer looking at those, because we know that those are potential costs.
I'm just having trouble understanding if your decision is going to be based on all these cost charts and everything like that, but you can't get any estimates until you have the engineering plans. How are you going to get any estimates and decide what to do?
The short-term rehab has been fairly well documented in terms of estimates. We do have those.
No, okay. You know what I'm saying, right? How can you make a decision? This would be a huge thing to take this dam out. And how can you make any assumptions about taking it out without having any real concrete numbers? These aren't real numbers.
I mean, that's how we do, to be quite honest, any road project, you start with an engineer's estimate, and that sets the budget,
What if you start taking stuff out and then that's not what it really is? Then we're in the situation that we're always in. The wastewater treatment plant with the rec center, all these things is what you thought it was gonna be, but it's not. Correct?
Until you get actually, contractors in to get it, I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, that's right. The other thing is, the stream, that rendering of the stream, that rendering of the stream, it's a little confusing, because you say it's 50 feet wide. How wide is the actual water?
50 feet.
The
water width is 50 feet, yes. There's a misconceptions in the back that has a better drawing on it. Maybe we can pull that out.
And the green space on either side, how wide is that?
I believe that was 80 feet on each side. There's a little chart on the front page of that, Nicole, that says the river widths. Yeah, so that outlines, and so this is 50 feet wide here, and then I think 80 feet on either side, I think.
Have there been any landscape people or any investment interest at all in getting estimates on what it would take to, what's going to be planted in that green space? Because all the parks here have really big problems with invasive species, all of them. They just come in and take over, and will we even be able to get to the water?
I agree with your comment on invasive species. My parcel abuts Mill Pond Park, and we recently did a large invasive species removal in our backyard forest. So yeah, I agree. We definitely have an invasive species problem, but this is all intended to be, that's why it's all natural. So this on the bottom right is just what you will call natural native flowers. The only improvement is this proposed pathway on this particular rendering.
I'm just concerned because Saline does not have a really good track record of taking care of this stuff. I mean, the Curtis Parks used to have a tennis court, they had to take it out because of disrepair. We used to go and play tennis there all the time. That footbridge down at the end is so overgrown with invasive species, you can't even get to it anymore. And now we're talking about, it sounds like we're just going to have beautiful flowing river. I just, 2.5 feet deep, what about in a drought season? We're not gonna have that. I just don't understand where anybody thinks they're gonna have that.
It'll be very similar to the river that goes adjacent to your property on Curtis, because you're downstream of the dam, so the width and the flow of the river here will be very similar to what's downstream, with the exception that downstream is a little bit flatter.
Where's the water coming from?
Right now, the dam does not provide, the dam is just
No, where's the water coming from that feeds the dam and the mill pond?
So this is one of the river system. What water comes in the dam goes out. There's no control.
Is it coming from drains?
Yes.
Combination of drains and.
Pittsfield drain?
Yes.
Right. So that's not a river. It's runoff,
It
right?
comes from the,
It becomes the Saline River as the Pittsfield drain.
Yeah, but it's not, the water in the Saline River is not coming from a river, it's coming from drain systems, runoff.
Yeah, as was pointed out earlier, this is not a flood control structure. The water that comes in goes out.
I agree.
There's no change,
Yeah, just,
other than maybe a little bit of evaporation.
okay. All right.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Jennifer Stebbin. I'm a city of Saline resident, and my family has lived here for over 100 years. So I appreciate listening to all of these comments because I came here to get facts and information. And I think that this brings up a lot of passions because this is a real identity piece within our community. A lot has been talked about, and I really like your comments. I like a lot of the comments I'm hearing, but I would also like to know about the landscaping. I think that that's a totally valid question. I'd like to know about what happens downriver. So where you were talking about the fish, where we have the 21 different species, that's down where I live. So I'd like to know, all of the schematics show what's north of Michigan Avenue. I would like to know what happens south of Michigan
Avenue. The intent, so downstream, I think the biggest concern with downstream, the biggest concern downstream would be a failure of the dam that released all the sediment uncontrolled. So if I live downstream of the dam, I would be concerned about that. So I think after dam removal, if we, our intent would be to control the sediment would be required by permitting. Downstream should look exactly the same. I mean, it's really, the intent is not to change the dynamic of the river downstream, it's just to open up, if the dam were to be removed, to open up where the dam is. So, I would caveat that with maybe just a little bit of the, I think you touched base on the sediment hungry water that's usually downstream, so there's oftentimes directly downstream of banks, there's a little bit more erosion on the side banks. So I guess I would say it could potentially be a little bit better because it wouldn't be pulling that sediment off the banks anymore.
That's a lot of water coming downstream.
So the water, don't look at the water that's coming down. The dam does not provide flood control. The dam is a run, this is very important. The dam does not, we have to open up the gates every time it rains. So however much water goes by your property now will go by your property in the future. Well, potentially a little bit more, there's more development upstream, but but yeah, so the dam does not provide flood control. Removal of the dam actually makes the flooding in Mill Pond and Curtis Park a teeny bit better actually, but it's really negligible. It makes it the same. So we would still see the flooding in the floodplain in both Mill Pond and Curtis Park, but it does not have an impact downstream or upstream.
My name's Gordon Peters. I live on Mill Pond, and we've been in this debate since 2011. So we've been working like crazy to try to get all the information we can. And there's a lot of assumptions we've talked about in this whole deal. But here's a couple of facts. This is the city's capital improvement proposal for this coming budget year. And they say $400,000 in 27, $500,000 in 28, $500,000 in 29, $3 million in 30, and $3 million in 31. I think a lot of people, and in the beginning, we're hoping for a lot of grant money, but it looks like whatever we do, we're going to pay for it. And if we could just have one more fact, in Ohio, there's a Gorge River Dam. I've talked about this before. They're in the process of removing it. The original estimate to remove that dam 10 years ago was $50 million. Once they started the project, now the estimate is between $130 and $180 million. And all that information is on the website. You can look it up. It's a fact. So that's my big fear, in addition to losing the beauty that we enjoy in our backyard of having that mill pond there, is what happens when, like somebody else said, we get a deal like with the water waste treatment plant, where we're not talking about going up a few million, we're talking about $100 million. And nobody can guarantee us that that's not gonna happen, because there's so many unknowns when you start a project like this.
Just if I comment on that briefly, sort of the capital improvement plan, we know we're gonna have to spend resources on the dam regardless, whether rehab or removal. So we use the higher number in the estimates.
I'm saying that we all hope that whatever was gonna be done was gonna be granted by a majority.
Right, and
That's still a big assumption.
That plan does not identify the funding source for that. That's not general fund dollars necessarily.
Well, it says here,
To be determined, I believe.
it says Saline River Dam on your report, and it says, and unknown funding or what. So it's an assumption, but there is some hard facts here that this is what we're gonna start doing if you approve this plan for the next budget.
Either plan.
No, I'm not talking about the money, I'm not talking about the plan for the dam, I'm talking about the money's gonna go there.
All future years have not been budgeted. That requires city council's
It's a
approval.
proposal from you guys.
It is a projection out, that we're gonna have to spend some money on Saline River Dam.
And I'm all about spending money on Saline River Dam.
Right.
I want to take a moment to ask the city manager and our colleagues here. It is 8 o'clock. Do we have more time? Are you still available?
We'll say as long as they want.
As they want.
Our consultant.
My name is Karen Peters. I also live on Saline River Drive. I've lived there for 42 years. I've got a couple things to say. And one of those slides, there was an indication that the dam has outlived its usability, meaning that we no longer need it to power a mill for soybeans. But what about the aesthetics? What about the fishing? What about the kayaking? What about the beauty when I wake up every morning and the sunshine is sparkling on my river? And why I bought the lot, and why I paid a premium for it, and why I've been here 42 years. And you're gonna just totally dismantle that, and I'm supposed to be okay with that. You haven't even talked about the depreciation in our homes. I mean, show me a piece of land that's waterfront property that isn't more than one that's not. You're gonna change my property from waterfront, a river, to a creek. The other thing is, that there's been a lot of comments about what's been done to the dam over the years. And I found out, I looked this up, there's only been recordings for 1973, 2004, 2005, and 2023. So that just tells you why we're having to pay so much now. Because these repairs have been put off, the can has been kicked down the road. And I'll give you an example here. The study that was required in 2020, the cost to repair everything that was needed at that time was $218,000. Now, fast forward to 2026, they're saying the cost to repair the dam is $1 to $1.5 million. Shouldn't postpone things. And the other thing is, if we had done everything that's called out in that 2020 report, I'm gonna respectfully disagree, because I've seen the inspection report for 2023, and there was at least 5 items that they said, these deficiencies were mentioned in the 2020 report. So we no way did we take care of everything that was called out in 2020, because it's being referenced to again. And here's another thing, for all you folks that think it's gonna be so wonderful just to remove the dam, this is in Spicer's report, the temporary disturbance. During removal of the dam, which may take up to 2 years, so probably the park isn't gonna be usable during those 2 years when they're taking it out, the project area will experience earth disturbing that will be unsightly to many. while the impoundment is being dewatered, there is a possibility of unpleasant odor emanating from the project area that may disturb local residents and businesses. Yeah, that's what I want to do, sit out on my deck and for 2 years be smelling something like that comes up in Monroe Street. I've taken logs out of that pond and they smell nasty. And I don't want to be smelling that for 2 years. And I don't think Wendy's at Weller's wants her wedding guests to be smelling that when they have weddings outdoors. So you better think about the situation, and I didn't appreciate the city plowing $3.1 million to buy Curtis Mansion when they knew
Did you have a question? Obviously, you know, we did talk about the fact that for a period of 2 years now, in terms of the odors, I mean, that'll be relatively short-lived, probably about 6 months of that. But it does take a while for the vegetation to reestablish. And I just want to point out that there would be no intent for the city to sell or, you know, to otherwise modify that park. You would still be potentially backing up to parkland if removal was the proposal. So.
Yes, and in the county misconceptions in the back, there's a couple of studies referenced on property values after these types of dams are removed. But I agree with you, and that you are viewing it as a value-based, and that's a value-based decision, whether you prefer a river or an impoundment. We're trying to look at all of the engineering things that are all of the costs associated with it, which aren't value-based, right? So I think half the people in this room, around maybe not half, I don't know, but some people in this room value the impoundment, some value the river. That's a value-based thing that we try to take out of the analysis for costs. Obviously, there's not a cost.
Well, an appraisal firm, we need to figure that out, who actually specialize in real estate versus a 20-year-old study. What's your question? I'm just adding.
Well, yeah, so the appraisal, they are not, so
I'm just curious, you know, appraisers, this is what their job is about, real estate. So are there plans to actually consult with an appraisal firm to figure the effect of property values, as opposed to citing a 20-year-old study out of Wisconsin and relying on it?
The city pays for private property.
yes, wait, real quick, Nicole.
There are a few questions about what the river would look like if the impoundment were gone. And I just want to clear that up a little bit, try to clear that up a little bit. The photo that you see there is an actual photo of the river taken upstream of the impoundment. And it looks really similar to what it does downstream of the impoundment. So when the impoundment, the dam, it's just a widening of this river. So the water flowing today upstream of the impoundment would continue through the park and continue downstream. There'd be no change in the volume of water.
I have a question about that. So when I go to
Real quick, because we're.
my name is Kim Phillips. So my question is, when I'm at the park and I'm at, you know, at the Mill Pond Park,
yes,
upstream, it's only like 12 or maybe at the most 15 feet wide. So I'm curious about how you arrived at the 15 feet.
So the north end of Mill Pond Park is where the Saline River meets the Pittsfield drain. So we have 2 trib areas coming in. So if you're actually the part that swells kind of more to the, I guess, east, if you will, closer to the parking lot, you know how that whole, like where the mermaid used to sit for the Celtic Fest, for the island, if you will, part of Mill Pond Park. That part of the park is, so all the way going up kind of to the northeast is coming in from the Pittsfield drain. From the northwest is the Saline River. So the two come together here. And so that's, and then continue downstream. And I actually do have afterwards, I brought maps of all of the Washington County drains. I also have a map of the River Basin watershed, just to answer just questions exactly like this.
I'm Chuck Cookham. I'm a registered civil engineer, structural engineer, longtime Consumers Energy employee, fixing many of our dams. They're older than your dam. I'm not going to say a lot because a lot was shared already by the residents. The one thing that's resonating to me, and I'm from Ann Arbor, we had an Argo Dam. Not too long ago, we had to deal with that. We have a beautiful situation because we saved Argo Dam. The one thing I'm going to say here that I really think is important, let the stakeholders that are in this room see the data. I don't think they're seeing information. I think there's a lot that's not been shared. There's a lot of studies, there's a lot of ecological assessments, there's new slides that this team hasn't seen, the team being the stakeholders. Share the information, let everybody weigh in on this, because it's not a one-way street here. It's a community that's got to make some pretty big decisions. So I would advocate for that very highly.
So if you have not been to the DAN website that posts a lot of the studies, and we're actually, I think we posted this presentation as well. You know, we're definitely trying to put as much out there as we can. And so encourage people to go to that, take a look at it. And if you have questions, yeah, email myself, Engineer Humphreys, you know, certainly, you know, we'll try to get you an answer.
Hey, my name is Sean Sutton. I live on Michigan Ave here in Saline. A couple things that I'm concerned about in terms of the financial costs of this that I don't think we're really addressing here. I think, first of all, is the time value of money. When we are looking at repairing the dam, a lot of those costs are further out. When we're looking at removing them, a lot of them are earlier. I think that we have been overly optimistic about the idea of getting grants, and I think we really need to come to the realization that we're going to need to pay for this, and we're probably going to need to take out bonds. And if we're going to be borrowing money to do this, because I don't think we've got $10 million laying around, we have to realize that it's going to cost us more money to have costs earlier, because we have to pay for the interest on those bonds. I think the other thing we need to look at are some of the additional costs. Landscaping was one of the items that had come up. We had that image shown, which looks AI generated, because when you look at it, the level is even with the roadway, which is significantly higher than the lake. Obviously, we're not going to be filling in millions of cubic feet of backfill to fill it up. The other thing is the cost of legal defense. I think that's a given based on some of the things that I've heard in here that some of the residents nearby will likely be filing lawsuits. Yeah, the one on the right, if you look at it, the ground on that is even. The house that's on the very left, that's my house, and it's about a 6-foot drop from my backyard to the waterfront, and here it's looking like it's even. So that's significantly higher, and honestly, it's going to be significantly lower. So there's going to be some major landscaping that needs to get done. It's going to cost significant amounts of money. I think that's something we need to look at. We need to look at the cost of legal defense, because there will be lawsuits filed. And we also need to look at property tax revenue. There will be lost revenue, because there will be lost property taxes, and even if we prevail in lawsuits against the city from the residents on the lost property values, there's still going to be the lost tax revenue.
Briefly mention in response to the appraisal questions, I never fully answered your question. I did speak with our appraisal, or our in-house assessor, I should say, and so none of the properties are waterfront. None of them are listed as waterfront properties because there's no riparian, so they're not waterfront properties as far as appraisal goes. That makes sense. Yeah.
That's not the same as the sales appraisal.
That would be relative to taxable value, not necessarily.
We actually have a waterfront property. Ours is listed as waterfront. So we would be losing property value from the removal.
I just wanted to add one more comment, and I'll try not to rant about data centers. The property value thing, you actually might have one of the more valuable properties because you did restoration work with native species and invasive, you know, so I had seen something, a report actually, that said there would be no cost to the landscaping once it's reverted back and it's all native, that the possibility exists that it wouldn't be any maintenance because that's the whole point of native species. So if the river is healthier and the safety is stronger downstream because it just reverts back to what it was and it doesn't cost much in the long term, to me that also just makes more sense. And just, if you're not aware, 100 million gallons being pulled minimum a year to build that data center is going to affect your watershed. I know, but like watershed, just so you know, it connects to your water, so your well situation, your infrastructure is going to be a problem more than it is. So just, if you didn't know that, you know, I didn't know a few months ago.
I just wanted to remind people that there's been some discussion about a vote, so that everyone who lives in the town would have an opportunity to express whether they want the dam or not.
And that is something that council could decide, is to put the question on the ballot.
Can't the residents do a referendum and then make you put it on the ballot? We tried. Why can't you put it on the ballot now?
If it can go on the ballot, then that would be a city council decision.
Hello, my name is Eric David. So, I've been living in Saline down here for 11 years. I moved all the way from Chicago down here to Saline. And I moved over here because of this. And if the city of Saline have much money on what to do, they have to work on their water. Their water is something that they've got it, even though I'm pointing myself with plastic. So this is important. I had somebody talking about 50 years. You got to think about today, before the 50 years. You got to start from today to talk about the 50 years to come. So if you don't have a good water to drink, and other stuff, it doesn't make sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience. So I remember from the first discussion that, and I don't know if it was Spicer Group, I can't remember that, that the people who were proposing taking it down would be the same people who would take it down. So is it still the same, like, do you guys both do the assessment and do the disrepair? Or how does that work? Because if you guys are doing the estimations and your estimation is leaning one way or the other, are you going to profit from tearing it down and not profit from leaving it up?
Make the reverse argument. Obviously, it would be in Spicer's best interest to have an ongoing revenue source for keeping the dam. They're dam experts. I obviously am just an infrastructure. We have hired Spicer to be our expert on the dam. It's very common with large infrastructure projects that you start with a preliminary engineering estimate with assumptions, and then you actually spend some survey dollars, you spend some study dollars, you develop plans, you develop specs, and as those and then you put it out to bid. We are in that very first stage with that. But I think as far as Spicer making profit off of the dam, the removal is a one and done. This is, as you can see, that keeps some money for a long time. So I think it's the exact opposite as far as Spicer goes. That would be my.
Oh, but that wasn't my point.
Yeah,
they're not contractors. They wouldn't do the physical work.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I shouldn't. Yeah, they would do the bid specs, and we would then bid out.
And a reminder as well that removal feasibility study was a grant that we received. So we had the money to really go into detail on that because it's a grant that we received. And that was what they put together for us because we had that money available to say, what does this really look like if we were to remove this thing?
I just had a little fun. I guess my main point was that how, and that's why I wanted a clarification, because if you guys were the ones that were putting in the numbers and you were also then going to be able to do the work, that to me is a huge conflict of interest. Okay. My other question though was with the fishery downriver, you mentioned that there were different species. Aren't those coming from the fishery that's down there? So it's not anything that the dam is causing the different species.
Are you referring to the fish hatchery?
I'm sorry?
Are you referring to the fish
hatchery? Yeah.
There's a fish hatchery.
The fishery.
Oh.
We have one that's downstream.
No, that's not related. So the fish that are in the river downstream or upstream, this is a fish community that's been here for decades, really. It's just, these are natural occurring fish in the river. They wouldn't have been stocked. We're talking about suckers and minnows.
I'm sorry, I thought you said that the dam was blocking some species from getting downriver, but that downriver had more than upstream. But isn't it true that it's because the fishery is downriver?
No? Okay.
No. I don't even know what, is that hatchery functional? I'm not sure, but the species that we're talking about are these, some of the pictures here. These aren't fish that are raised in hatcheries. These are just natural occurring native species to Michigan.
Okay.
It's been said that our dam has past its useful life. I have to remind people that 67.4% of all Michigan dams are now used for recreation. These are dams that once built for water wheels and industry. Now, we're right on schedule. It's our dam. It was once built for a water wheel and now used for recreation. And also, I would invite everybody here to talk to Dexter. They have nothing but headaches with their dam removal. And they go down and see Milan. Milan does not demonized remove their dam. They made an attraction. You should see it beautiful. They got walkways, lighting, seating. It's an asset to the city. It's actually beautiful. So do those two things you can. And,
Hi, I'm Denise Goss. I live on Stonecliff Court, and my backyard is also the river. And I just have a small question. There is a storm wastewater runoff that comes underneath Saline River Drive from the west and drains into the impoundment now. How is that going to be handled if the impoundment and it don't meet anymore? It's just going to run over all the grass that's there?
I assume you're talking about a stormwater outlet, which, yes, so I guess current stormwater regulations do prefer the overflow to putting them in cement pipes and sending them downstream, right? You get more absorption in the area it is. So yes, that would have to be reverted in a way, either through a swale type or an enclosed pipe to get back to the pond. Now, all of our renderings we do have, which follows the historic of the river too. We have all of the river going on the west side, if you will. So really the distance, basically keeping the park on the east side of the river and keeping the natural look, if you will, for everyone on the west side is kind of how we envision it. And it lines up with where the pond was historically, at least the documentation we can find from the early 1900s, where the pond wants to go. Because if the dam were to fail, the river would find a way. Right, the river is going to find a way, and we actually think it probably will find the natural bottom that was there for thousands of years, right? So if the dam were to fail, the river was flowing through here for thousands of years, the river is going to find that natural way, and we think it's going to look a lot like this and be closer to the west and further, so that pipe or that swale would hopefully be shorter.
Anyone else over here?
Hey guys, Jake Heel, also live on Saline River Drive. Good to see all my neighbors here tonight. And certainly a challenging decision. Thanks for everyone's thoughts and opinions. You definitely could see it obviously going either way. Ultimately, on the value base side, I just want to say I would probably, on the aesthetic and usability side, lean towards the river, more of a creek river side. With the rendering, now the one I don't think you guys have gotten to this point, so I don't think there's an answer to it. And I think that the one kind of trepidation that I would have is to get to that point of the rendering, right? So there's a jump there, and I would just want to make sure that the funding was there for. It's obviously a huge funding gap for whatever you do, whether it's repair or removal. But then if there was removal, then the funding gap to revegetation and getting it to the point that it was at. So just making sure that that funding was there, and if you got to that point, it was a short-term gain. Towards, I think, from my perspective, an enhancement of the area. But I can see why people think differently.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tom Marco. I am a resident of Saline and also a homeowner in Saline. Many of the people that I've talked to when I was manning a table to get signatures to put this on the ballot thought, well, we don't need the dam. And then we said, well, guess what? The pond will be removed if you remove the dam. They didn't know about that. So my question is, why doesn't the city council do a better job of telling the citizens of Saline that, hey, once you remove the dam, you're not going to have a pond anymore? That may change a lot of people's ideas on the dam removal, who think right now it's a great idea. That brings me into the next question about why doesn't the city council
go to the citizens of Saline, since we voted you in, why don't you get our feeling on this? Sure, the people here are very, very passionate, but the people out there don't know the whole story about the dam removal. I think it's time to get them involved too. Thank you.
So I can't speak to the efforts of city council in particular, but I know from working with Tasha and the rest of the volunteers that make up the Environmental Commission that we have been having tables at the Winter's Farmers Market to spread out informational leaflets about this study and what the study addresses and the information that is available online and all of the different pictures of the river, and that is always included in the informational materials that we
repairs too.
the repairs.
When you're talking about the dam, are you addressing the repairs that could happen instead of just taking out the dam?
Correct, because it's just a study to show both options, and the reason that there's more pictures of what it would look like without the dam is because we already know that it's included in it.
Are these the pamphlets you're using?
Those right there. And so when we're talking about the river removal, we are mentioning, yes, that means that the river would go back into a more natural state, which means losing the pond.
Certainly talked to a lot of people. They don't know that.
And that was one of the criticisms we actually heard, and that's why the renderings were done, is to show what it would look like if with the pond removed.
I've got one more question on the dam parts that Eagle would like to have repaired, the concrete wall. And Mr. Wilkes brought that up earlier, and he said the study we did in 2021 showed, the walls needed work. He said they recently looked at it, and they're much more deteriorated. Eagle sent the city a warning letter on December 16th of 2021, or 2024, and said, why haven't those things been taken care of? This is really a microcosm. The dam is a microcosm of how the city deals with infrastructure. And if this was taken care of, you wouldn't have Eagle sending you warning letters. Why you're not dealing with the most important things in the dam that Eagle wants you to take care of. And it was probably 5 years ago, Eagle fines the city $100,000 for not taking care of things down at the waste treatment plant. So why does the state of Michigan through Eagle have to keep telling the city to maintain its own infrastructure?
I think the short answer for that is before spending significant capital funds on rehab, I think that the decision should be made, and that's what we've indicated is we do need to make a decision soon on which direction we head.
Why does Eagle have to keep pushing the city to maintain their own infrastructure? You weren't here.
It is a concern we're pursuing, yes.
All right, I've got a couple of quick online questions. The first one is Mill Pond currently safe for swimming, fishing, or boating?
No.
Never
The general consensus for people who live there is no. Obviously, as very mucky bottom, we spoke to the turbidity. Certainly, there are people fishing.
Swimming.
Especially in next week.
There are no swimming.
Okay, and then my second question is, will there be a river walk added, and how will the land be used if the pond were to go away?
The short answer is there's already a Saline River Walk planned that will go along basically the east side of the site. If the pond were removed, it does open up the possibility to add an extension to Curtis Park underneath US 12.
Hi, my name is Andrew Chef. I live Saline, off Saline River Drive, so on the left side of town here. I have lots of thoughts about this. But before I share much more, I'm curious, did I understand correctly that the study that was done was focused on dam removal because that was the grant money we had to do this? Is that right?
So there was more funding in the beginning for the feasibility study for removal, because we had obviously already some engineering estimates for repair or rehabilitation. So we somewhat understood that already. So the option of removal was investigated further.
Okay, I mean, that makes sense to me, but at the same time, it's a little confusing to me because it seems like as part of that study, we looked at, well, what might this become, right? What's the potential here if we remove the dam? But conversely, we're not really looking at what's the potential of this asset that we already have, should we repair it? We're really just kind of looking at cost. Mill Pond, as I've always understood it, has been a sort of a jewel, been the jewel park of the city. And a lot of our parks budget doesn't really go to the parks themselves. Seems to go elsewhere, goes to the rec center and things like that. The play structure is in bad shape at Mill Pond and all of that. The pavilion over there needs some attention. It just makes me wonder, why haven't we looked at the potential of what else we might do with the park? Should we keep the dam? How can we enhance what we already have?
As I mentioned earlier, on Monday, the Parks Commission is going to be presenting some preliminary studies that we've done. We've attended some other parks and we've seen some other things. And a lot of what you'll see in that documentation would include the dams. There's things like adding kayak launches, there's things like expanding the dog park, depending on which way Mill Pond ends up. So if you attend on Monday, or if you listen in on Monday, we'll also put those documents online as well. The Parks Commission, they've been doing an amazing job of really kind of honing in what great opportunities are out there, what we do, hopes and dreams for the park enhancements, no matter if we touch the dam or not.
Well, I mean, I've lived here almost 10 years now, and I've seen very little done to any of the parks in that time. I've seen things just fall into disrepair. My subdivision was built in the 80s. There's a park at the end of the street. It's called a park. It's nothing but green space. There's no play structure. There's a sidewalk that goes through to connect to two neighborhoods. That's it. So it's disappointing because part of what we lived for was the parks.
Well, we pay taxes. We got, the west side has been avoided. We don't have the sidewalks. You guys replaced a drain at the park that you're speaking of 5 years ago. We still have a lake every time it rains. Right. So all of that money that was invested, well, it wasn't even repaired.
So I mean, the other thing that I find sort of interesting is that, as was mentioned earlier, we spent some money on purchasing the Davenport House, and there's a lot of emphasis on, well, this is what the gateway to the city looks like on the east side. We need to maintain this, it's really important aesthetically, et cetera, et cetera. But on the west side, the gateway to the city is essentially Mill Pond Park. I know that is an asset to this city. And I do see kids fishing, I do see kids boating, my own kid fishes there pretty often. And because of what I've seen done in the parks, it's very hard for me to believe that if we take out the dam, all of these beautiful renderings are great. Like if I had the faith that all that would happen, I might be a bigger supporter. But at this point, it's like, it's pipe dream type stuff. Right?
I'd like to just, I do share your concerns with our mounting infrastructure needs. Like I said, I've lived here for 25 years now and very cautiously applied for this job 4 years ago, knowing what I was stepping into. Let's say now that I've looked behind the curtains, my concerns have not gotten less. We have massive infrastructure needs. That capital plan that Mr. Peters was referring to, I believe has $160 million over the next 5 years in it. So when I look around at how I want to spend my time, I want to spend my time working on our essential services, cleaning up our water, our sanitary sewer, our storm sewer. So our water and sewer rates are in a different pot of money, but the dam is, I guess, in the same pot of money as general funds. And if we're looking at what I consider essential in general funds, it would be our storm sewer system. Our sanitary sewer system is eons ahead of our storm sewer system because it has a rate placed to and it's not eons ahead of others. I mean, there's a lot of needs, lots and lots and lots of needs. And we are only a city of 10,000 people. We are not a city, so we don't have the funds to, we have to choose wisely on our community assets and enhancements. That's, I guess, what I have to say about that. And so I appreciate those that say, please don't throw the arrows at me. I understand that there's some bias coming out, but I would be really bad at my job if I said, please, let's spend a bunch of money and resources on this asset that's no longer serving its original purpose.
So when first, thank you, I did actually go and use the resource with all of the, yeah.
I was my computer died, so I'm no longer available, so I'm no longer IT.
Yeah, in fact, your PowerPoint was already on there, so I'm earlier today, because it's my lunch hour. I did just really quick, can I just make a plea then? If this is what's being used as the information to the citizens of Saline, this is, every teacher I've ever had in Saline schools and beyond would be upset with me if I didn't call out the bias in this. It is 100%, this is persuasive, this is not informative. As informative, that is unfair to citizens at that point. So don't act like you're informing when you're persuading. That's all. Just be informative or move on.
Thank you.
I just wanted to comment real quick. So I think that with the study and everything that has been done, a huge chunk or something that isn't being made transparent, it's not at fault of anyone because we really don't look into it at this level. I mean, we'd have to get some sort of hardware to do it, but one of the unintended effects of sitting at, I also sat at a table at the fair to educate the citizens who frequented the fair about the dam, and it might have been, or it would possibly be removed and what it would do to the park, was the people from outside Saline. So we had a ton of people who actually got, some of them got rather heated when we said, you know, it's possible that it might take away the pond at Mill Pond Park. And we had people from Ann Arbor, we had people from surrounding counties that would travel here just for Mill Pond Park. And I think that, you know, it is one of our most popular, if not most popular park in our city. We might be possibly shooting ourselves in the foot, not looking at what kind of traffic we get through there. And we're not really seeing it with the other counties or the people who are traveling here. You know, we hear from the citizens and everything, but as far as trying to boost this news everywhere to everyone who might use that park, I'm not seeing a whole lot of amplification of that. So it just concerns me that we could be losing revenue in a place that is a very big tourist attraction for Saline.
So Jen, is that data in the 5-year parks plan? Did we, when we surveyed the 5-year parks plan, did we survey, you know, what park do you use and capture the data on users of parks?
Have to review that.
Okay.
They have to review that.
Maybe we'll take a look at that, and if so, if it does contain that, maybe we'll put that up on the Mill Pond.
Well, and I agree. I love Mill Pond Park, which is why I bought my parcel next to it. And I use it all the time. And I see most of the people using the north end. Like I walk it all the way to Curtis, and then I play hopscotch across 12 to get to Curtis. And I will say that, I mean, although people do walk along the goose trails, if you will, to get to the other side, I see a majority, I agree with you, the majority of the use is on the north side of the park.
But
yeah.
One of the things is, if people are coming in to be tourists at Mill Pond Park, they're coming for the park, they're also going by Main Street and all the stores. They're boosting our business. So
Right. I'm hoping
we're drawing people in. And I just
we captured that data. If we captured that data, it's a great discussion point.
I just worry we'll miss that if we get rid of it.
Just to piggyback on what you said about the water as an asset, I've done some research on the surrounding communities that have ponds, waterways, and we are the only ones around here in this area that don't capitalize on that with canoes, with fishing, with kayaking. I found out that there is a kayak launch down there, but you can't find it because it's so dilapidated.
Well, and we actually, the city, I mean, there's no swimming, wading, fishing signs posted, and we don't have any buoys or controls, so.
That's what I'm saying. We don't have, what we need to draw people and use that as an asset, as opposed to a liability.
Oh, I see, like opening up that impoundment for.
I just need clarification on, if I understood this right, that Spicer is only doing consulting work and no actual work. Because I was at a city council meeting where there was $32,000 taken from the general fund, and it says, to acknowledge receipt of the memorandum from engineer Humphreys and to approve or not approve the contract with Spicer Group for an as-needed engineering services associated with Saline River Dam in an amount not to exceed $32,000 for miscellaneous tasks such as updating of the emergency action plan and improving the remote monitoring of the site.
So these are ongoing maintenance things that they're looking at, as well as obviously the time to evaluate the cost of rehab and evaluate the cost of removal. So that's the consulting work. They don't do any of the, when you say that, what was referenced before is they don't do any of the construction work. And so there's no incentive for them to go one way or the other.
Improve the remote monitoring of the site. You're just giving recommendations.
So like for that, for instance, we needed survey work done to set the elevations for the new updated monitoring level sensor. So that's one of the upgrades we have done in the last couple of years is put the new level sensor on it. So I don't know if you noticed when you drive by, there's currently a marker, a gauge that's painted different colors. And so that's an outdated, antiquated system to drive by and see if you're in the red. So now we have an actual level sensor. We need Spicer's help to get the elevations, actual survey data, that type of things is what they're helping with, all the engineering side of things associated with the dam.
So if the dam is removed and there was talk about the annual maintenance operation cost of $68,000, is that $32,000 part of that?
So no, in fact, no, that $32,000 is, no. The annual maintenance is, I'm sorry, I no longer have my screen, but on that screen in the slideshow, which is posted online, all of those tasks are what are in that $68,000. Okay, so and these are all, I think, additional tasks, and a lot of, I mean, this costs money. This presentation tonight costs, I mean, doing this analysis costs money. So that's a good chunk of why we're spending more money this year.
Yeah. And just one last question for Spicer, and this is what makes people undermine, credibility about numbers. When you did the dam feasibility study in March of '25, you estimated the cost to be $16,000 a year for operation and maintenance if we repaired the dam. And now it's $68,000. It's not even a year later. What did you anticipate in the study in 2025 that made your estimate in 2025 be so grossly off, 16,000 versus 68,000?
So those were very, very preliminary estimates at that time, and since that time, we've worked with city staff to try to dissect what effort they're currently doing and what effort is recommended for the emergency action plan. But yeah, I guess that's pretty sure.
That did not include, I think the original estimate did not include a lot of the internal, in-kind work that the DPW was doing. And since they have interviewed DPW and gotten more detail of what they do and what we should be doing going forward, there's some things we're not doing right now that we should be.
Yeah, I'll add just a little bit more on that. So internally, one of the things we've done since I've been here is historically the plant staff operated the dam, not DPW, which the wastewater plant staff, just because they usually have to, historically my understanding is because they have to come in during rain events, but if they have to come in during rain events, that means they're busy at the plant. So one of the things we've recently done is transferred ownership from the plant division over to, or not ownership, I should say, but maintenance responsibilities to DPW. That's a relatively new thing that occurred about a year ago today. The DPW has been taking care of it. And part of that, we took a good hard look internally. Like I said, I mean, I haven't been here that long, and I admit we have deferred maintenance. You're absolutely right. Everyone here is absolutely right. We haven't done things on this dam. But this is, we know what we should be doing, and that's what that number is based on. Thank you. We now know what we should be doing. Right, I mean, that's it.
I'm Sammy. I live on that house
that is right on our pond, lake, whatever you want to call it, and we can indeed boat and fish from there. However, looking at this chart, I do have some concerns about the fact that we will no longer be able to kayak or canoe. I do not personally enjoy it, but I know my father and brother love it very much, and we invite people over to our house. We have, a lunch in town supporting the local businesses, and we go out and spend the day on the water. However, it says here that the depth will only be 2.5 feet, and that is not nearly enough room to boat at all with anything. And I'm wondering what we would do about that, because that is also, I imagine a lot of other people do that too. I have heard that other people can't even have boats out there.
And that's based on removal, that it would go back to a quote-unquote natural river, and that's but with the sea in depth in terms of upstream and downstream, so that is accurate. It would be shallower, obviously.
And so we would lose the ability to boat, and which is definitely something that I know some people might not be able to do, but I know that my family in particular really enjoys. And is one of the reasons we purchased this property was for the lakeside view specifically.
And I do understand that, and I agree, yes, I understand that concern. I would like to just mention with the 2.5 foot depth that that's on average. As the river does now, in droughts, it's going to be less, and in rain events, it's going to be more. So there's, but that's on average what it would be throughout.
Okay, to Eric's point about Eagle's relationship with the city, I have people who are here to the city, and they're asking us, we're making this way harder than it needs to be. The answer is simple, just fix what we have. Here's Eagle, they're asking us to fix the 2-year walls with a focus on the trunnion tin anchors. Those are steel plates with 4 holes. The way you got to do is fix that. Well, for competitive bids, get 3 bids, big contractor, maybe $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, I don't know. But just get it done, fix it. That's what we have to do for now. The rest of this stuff, it's just pie in the sky stuff. And I don't believe any of it, Randy, believe me. I think I'll be quick. Did I understand earlier that if we remove the dam, we already know we have some endangered species that we're gonna have to study and account for?
You got, I'm going to buy away.
Tethered.
You are.
All we know is that there's one species of threatened mussel that occurs upstream of the dam in the river.
And then, did I understand correctly that that would require us to do further studies and, do we have any idea what those costs are?
Assumptions on those, yes, and that's.
Do we have do we have talked to anybody else who's had to do them, and we know what it costs?
Yeah, I've done them.
Yeah?
I've done a lot of them.
Okay. So do we know that those costs built into these numbers over here? Yeah.
Can you tell us?
Yeah, can you tell us what it would cost?
$4,000-ish.
Oh, that's it? Okay. I'm reasonable, $4,000 is not much.
So, not to open a can of worms here, the mussel surveys and procedure are pretty complicated. So if the dam removal were to move forward and take place, there'd likely have to be relocation of mussels done. So when that's dewatered and these critters are stranded, then that would be a different kind of effort.
So that's a different cost.
Yeah.
How much is that?
It depends on what species are found and how many of them. Based on the preliminary data, there aren't many mussels in the impoundment.
Somewhere it said 2 million.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
Yeah, folks, if you could just let the gentleman answer, please.
Based on our preliminary survey, there are not many mussels in the impoundment. It's not great habitat. So it's impossible to know how much that would cost.
Okay.
The next survey to figure out what species are there, a more detailed survey, is about $4,000. And then based on what is found during that survey, it could be the end of mussel work, or there might be other requirements. That is dictated by the state.
So we don't really know.
We don't know. No.
Okay. just, I guess it feels like that's the recurring theme. I don't know a lot about how it's, and I understand that there's limitations, but it just makes it hard to make these decisions when, you know, like I said, $4,000, what's that in the scheme of 5 or 10 million? But, you know, we're talking another, I don't know, $300, $400, $500 million to relocate something. I don't know.
I can answer part of the question. At my former community, City of Tecumseh, we had to do a drawdown because we had an issue with our dam as well. And it was a matter of, we had previously done the survey, as he said, a few $1,000s. We had to have a staff out there during the drawdown to relocate. It was literally, I think it was $7,000 to $8,000. So it was not, it's thousands of dollars. It's not, you know, beyond that.
Sure.
Thank you. And that was a requirement once we did the survey to, you know, have people out there as the drawdown happened to move the muscles.
Do you know, have any idea about the migrating birds and there's nesting eagles there right now and herons? Will this stream attract those waterfowl? Will it be viable for?
So that would be a question that's answered during the environmental assessment. Bald eagles is one of the species that's it's a federally listed species. So that's something.
Down there, so that's why I bring it up.
Yeah. And would they nest there? I don't know. Probably not. Eagles are found on rivers throughout Michigan.
Yeah.
You know, they feed in the rivers. Would they nest there? I don't know.
They do, they nest off to the west. So, do we have any final questions before we wrap up for the night? Again, all of the information is online, and then I'll pass off for some closing statements from our colleagues. If any final burning questions, and of course, you can always reach out to that dam@salinemi.gov, or reach out to the city manager. Yes?
We keep hearing this is an impending decision that needs to be made. I haven't heard, like, what, do we have a timeline, like, when this decision will be made?
Ultimately, that's up to council, but my recommendation from the city management and what we've been discussing is we need to make a decision by the end of the calendar year, pretty much because we need to either pursue, you know, funding for removal or funding for rehabilitation, one or the other, and how we're going to do that. So it is becoming timely because, you know, as was mentioned, the inspections are showing that some of the gates, some of the pier walls are continuing to deteriorate. So we probably only have 2 to 3 years left on those that, you know, repairs have to be made. So we have to make a decision, in my mind, within a year so that we can then proceed with funding and final engineering and permitting.
You can always reach out to council as well, so council@salinemi.gov. We prefer it to go to dam@salinemi.gov, just so that it's a question Tasha can answer, or someone else in engineering who has expertise can answer, and then she'll forward it on to us. But either way, we're open and available to chat with as well. Obviously, since we are the politicians, we're the ones who you elected to make these decisions for you, not them. So feel free to reach out to us as well. But I'm gonna pass it back over to you folks for closing statement.
I think you covered it, just in terms of the follow-up, obviously the information is posted online. I encourage you to go to just Google Saline, Michigan Dam, and it'll pop up right to that page. It basically comes right up on a Google search. And then also at the email, dam@salinemi.gov, we encourage you to email that with any final comments. And my understanding is we will have it as a discussion item for council coming up. And then, ultimately, probably in the next few months, a decision request one direction or the other.
I'll speak for my colleagues here when I say these are really helpful conversations for us, because it gets us to have questions that we may be able to ask. It gets us thinking about things as well. So I think I speak for all of us when I say thank you all for attending tonight. This was a really great conversation. I feel more informed about what the community wants. I obviously feel more informed about what these studies have shown. Did either of you, did anyone want to say anything else?
I would just like to say the old mill has not been brought up, and I understand this is about the dam, but we will be greatly affected by anything that happens, because it was part of the Small River system. But we have an open house every Saturday. Anybody can come down and see inside the building. People are able to come. Most of our weddings, honestly, are from out of Saline. They're not from Saline. And when they come into the whole area, they're just flabbergasted by it, honestly. And I don't think you've ever been in the building, right? Come on down. Every Saturday we're there, and I'm there every Monday and Thursday too. So if anybody wants to come and visit, can walk around the building, walk in the buildings, walk around the property. We have a lot of people that come and just walk around Lois because it is a park setting down there. So I think you'd be surprised, so.
And for those online, that was Wendy Miller.
All right. And I guess I just wanted to add, trying to stick around as long as whoever wants to talk. I'd love to talk one-on-one. I'm much more comfortable in that environment than this one. So please come ask me questions. I brought some additional detail, references if you want to ask more questions. So thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.